Hi guys. Tonight, we embark on a journey into the wilderness, a world of thick forests, open plains, rocky cliffs, and rushing rivers. Imagine yourself stepping into the quiet of this vast, untamed expanse. The air is sharp and crisp, filling your lungs with each breath. You feel the weight of the earth beneath your feet, each step taking you deeper into this natural realm. There are no stores, no markets, no packaged foods here. You're left to rely on the land around you for survival. But what do you eat? How do you find enough nourishment to thrive in a world without convenience? This, of course, was a reality faced by the Native Americans for centuries. And while their survival skills were refined over generations, it's a stark reminder of just how challenging life could be. In this world, survival wasn't about picking up fast food or driving down to the corner store. It was about deep knowledge, finely tuned instincts, and a profound connection to the land. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, we're in this together, discovering how these first peoples navigated their world and thrived, with nothing but nature at their side. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Leave a comment with your location. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin our story. The survival skills of Native Americans were far more than just practical. They were an embodiment of centuries of adaptation, wisdom, and respect for the natural world. Their ability to understand what to eat and how to find sustenance was not just about physical survival, but about living in harmony with the land and its cycles. Whether they were foraging for plants, hunting game, or fishing in the nearby rivers, every food source was carefully chosen and harvested with purpose. It wasn't always easy. Historians still argue whether certain Native American tribes would have survived without the help of their unique agricultural practices. The knowledge they held, passed down through generations, was not only valuable, it was essential. The tribes knew how to make the most of their surroundings, from the dense forests of the northeast to the sweeping grasslands of the Great Plains and the rocky, arid landscapes of the southwest. Their food sources were as diverse as their environments, and each meal told a story of ingenuity and adaptation. Imagine yourself standing in the woods, surrounded by towering trees. The ground is rich with leaves and soil, and beneath the forest's canopy, you're starting to get a sense of the landscape around you. What do you do next? How do you know what's edible and what's not? How do you find nourishment when survival is all that matters? The answer, of course, lies in the wisdom of the past, which still resonates today. Native Americans knew how to read the land, how to listen to it, and how to find what they needed to survive and thrive. And so, the first thing you'd probably notice is something called the Three Sisters. These three crops, corn, beans, and squash, were staples in the diets of many Native American tribes. Not only were they vital for survival, but they were a remarkable example of symbiotic planting. Each crop helped the others grow. The beans would climb the corn stalks, using them as natural trellises, while the squash would spread out, covering the soil and protecting it from weeds. The Three Sisters were not just a source of nourishment. They were a symbol of balance, sustainability, and mutual support, qualities that extended beyond agriculture and permeated the way of life for many Native Americans. Historians still debate the origins of this practice. Did the indigenous peoples of the Americas develop the Three Sisters on their own, or was it influenced by interactions with early settlers? Regardless of the answer, the result was the same. The Three Sisters provided sustenance for entire communities, supporting them throughout the year and allowing for a balanced diet. The combination of the three crops, corn, beans, and squash, offered essential nutrients like protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Together, they were more than just food, they were a lifeline, the cornerstone of survival in the wilderness. So, as the evening wears on and the wilderness around you grows quiet, you may find yourself wondering, how did they manage during the harsh winters? How did they endure the cold, the storms, and the scarcity of resources when nature seemed to turn against them? Well, survival wasn't just about having the right foods, it was about preserving them for the long haul. As the nights grow colder and the days shorter, you realize that surviving in the wilderness isn't just about what you can hunt or forage today, it's about preparing for what lies ahead. Imagine a bitter winter night closing in. The wind howls through the trees, and the temperature plummets to freezing. Out here, in this vast wilderness, you have no choice but to rely on the food you've carefully gathered, stored, and preserved throughout the warmer months. This is where the true genius of Native American survival skills comes into play. Their ability to not only find food, but to keep it for when it would be needed most. One of the primary techniques they used to ensure survival through the long winter months was drying. Drying food, whether fish, meat, or fruits, was a key method for preserving what was gathered or hunted during the warmer seasons. After all, the wilderness doesn't always provide a reliable food source, especially in regions where the winter months can stretch for months on end. Dried fish, such as salmon, would be hung and smoked over a fire to preserve its flavor and nutritional content. This wasn't just about keeping the food edible for a few days, but about ensuring that there was enough to sustain you until the thaw came again. Historians still argue whether this preservation technique was a learned practice from European settlers or if it was a long-established tradition among the Native Americans. Regardless, it was highly effective. By drying food, they could stockpile protein-rich meals that could last throughout even the harshest winters. The dried meat would be soaked and cooked, turning it into stews or broths that provided both sustenance and warmth. The act of drying wasn't just a method, it was a crucial part of the Native American lifestyle, ensuring survival during times when food was scarce and the elements unforgiving. Smoked meats were often stored in animal hides or woven baskets, cleverly designed to keep the food safe from insects or other wildlife. Every part of the animal was used, not just the meat, but also the bones, skins, and sinew. The bones could be turned into tools, while the skins were tanned to make clothes, and the sinew was used for sewing or even crafting weapons. There was an incredible resourcefulness to how Native Americans utilized everything they could, ensuring that nothing went to waste. And this wasn't just about getting by, it was about thriving, making sure there was not only enough to survive, but to live comfortably in the wilderness. But it wasn't all about the big game or the hearty meals that could keep you warm on a cold night. Even in the dead of winter, when large animals were more difficult to hunt, the smaller creatures, like squirrels, rabbits, and birds, offered important sources of nutrition. These animals were easier to trap and hunt, and their meat could be dried or smoked just like the larger game. But it wasn't just the animals that offered sustenance. Native Americans were skilled foragers, knowing the land so well that they could find edible plants even during the colder months. In fact, many tribes had elaborate methods of preserving their food throughout the seasons. The Iroquois, for instance, were known for their technique of pounding corn, creating a type of dried cornmeal that could be stored in sealed containers for long periods. This cornmeal was essential during the long winters, providing a solid base for soups, stews, and breads. Additionally, wild nuts like acorns, which were abundant in the fall, were ground into flour and stored in tightly sealed baskets, providing another essential staple for the winter months. It's this ingenuity, this deep understanding of nature's rhythms, that helped these peoples endure through seasons when survival was anything but guaranteed. Yet, the survival story wasn't just about what could be stored, it was also about what could be found when you ventured out into the wilderness in search of sustenance. Food wasn't always readily available, especially in areas where resources were scarce. Sometimes, surviving meant knowing exactly where to look and what to look for. This is where foraging for wild plants came into play. Certain plants and roots were edible even in the dead of winter, though they often required a little more work to prepare. Take the humble acorn, for example. Historians and anthropologists have long debated the significance of acorns in the Native American diet. These small, hard nuts, which many people might ignore as little more than a nuisance, were an important food source. But there's a catch: acorns contain tannins, compounds that make them bitter and potentially toxic if not properly prepared. The process of leaching these tannins out of acorns was time-consuming, but it was a crucial skill that allowed acorns to become a vital part of the diet, often ground into flour and used in a variety of dishes. Much of this knowledge about what was edible and what wasn't was passed down orally, generation to generation, with each tribe having its own set of methods and practices. In this way, Native Americans created a living library of information, passed down with great care, ensuring that each generation was well equipped to survive. It wasn't just about eating, it was about thriving, making sure that their people could live off the land for generations to come. And while the lands were rich with natural resources, these foods were far from guaranteed. As you sit by the fire on that winter's night, knowing that the months ahead will be tough, you realize just how important that knowledge of the land truly was. These were not just survival skills, they were the very foundation of a lifestyle, a culture, and a people whose deep connection to the earth ensured that they would not just survive, but live in a way that was deeply intertwined with the natural world. As you sit there, the fire flickering softly in the dark, your thoughts drift to how the land itself seemed to provide. From the towering trees to the smallest root in the ground, everything was interconnected. The Native Americans knew that every part of nature had its place, and that the relationship between people and the land was symbiotic. But the deeper truth lay in a simple yet profound truth: their food sources weren't just about sustenance, they were a way of life. Among the most significant sources of food were the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. These three crops were the backbone of the Native American diet and, quite literally, the foundation of their agricultural practices. Let's begin with corn. Corn wasn't just a crop, it was a cultural symbol, a life force that sustained entire communities. Native Americans in regions like the Midwest and the Southwest planted corn in fields, where it was grown alongside beans and squash. Historians still argue whether corn was domesticated by Native Americans independently, or if it was influenced by early Mesoamerican cultivation techniques. What is widely accepted, though, is that corn was a vital food source. It provided carbohydrates, fiber, and other nutrients that were essential to a balanced diet. And it wasn't just about eating it fresh. Corn was ground into flour, made into cornbread, and even fermented to create beverages like chicha, a form of corn beer. The beans, on the other hand, played a vital role in complementing the corn. You see, beans are legumes, and like all legumes, they have the magical ability to fix nitrogen into the soil. This means that while the corn was growing, the beans could actually replenish the soil, making it richer and more fertile for future harvests. In return, the beans would climb the tall corn stalks, benefiting from the height and structure that the corn provided. This clever companion planting ensured a healthy harvest each year, minimizing the need for fertilizers or complicated irrigation systems. Historians still marvel at how such an efficient agricultural system was developed long before modern farming techniques. And then there's the squash. Squash vines spread out across the soil, shading the earth and preventing weeds from overtaking the crops. The large, broad leaves of the squash plants helped protect the roots of the other crops by retaining moisture and reducing the evaporation of water from the soil. It was as if nature itself had designed the perfect system for mutual support. And the squash wasn't just for decoration, it was edible in many forms. The flesh of the squash was rich in nutrients, while the seeds were roasted and eaten for their healthy fats and protein. Sometimes the leaves were also eaten, providing additional greens to the diet. Together, these three crops weren't just the sustenance of choice, they were a life philosophy. The idea of balance, of harmony with nature, was embedded in every meal. They weren't just planting crops for food, they were creating a sustainable, renewable system that would continue to nourish their people for generations. This was the genius of the three sisters. It wasn't just about survival, it was about a way of living that connected people to the earth, to each other, and to the future. As the fire crackles and the wind picks up outside, you begin to appreciate how deeply integrated the three sisters were into the lives of Native American people. This wasn't just food, it was culture, tradition, and a means of maintaining balance with the earth. Even today, these crops are celebrated not just for their nutritional value, but for their historical and cultural significance. The three sisters taught survival through cooperation, not competition, an enduring lesson that transcended their era and continues to influence modern agricultural practices. But of course, corn, beans, and squash weren't the only food sources available. You can almost hear the rustling of the forest leaves in the distance, and know that there were plenty of other wild resources to find in the wilderness. Fish, wild berries, nuts, and roots were all on the menu, depending on the season. The next chapter of your survival journey involves something even more crucial when food sources are unpredictable: hunting. Remember the animals that roamed this vast wilderness? You know, the ones that you might have spotted from the corner of your eye as you journeyed deeper into the forest? They, too, were part of the intricate web of survival. Whether you were hunting for a large game animal like deer or bison, or looking for smaller creatures like squirrels and rabbits, the animals provided essential protein and fats that were just as necessary as the plants that thrived nearby. The knowledge of how to hunt, track, and utilize every part of an animal was just as important as understanding the land itself. Historians still debate the specifics of hunting practices. Some say that certain tribes had highly sophisticated techniques that included communal hunts and the use of various tools and weapons, while others suggest that smaller, more personal hunting techniques prevailed. Regardless of the method, one thing was clear: the hunt was a vital part of survival. As you sit by the fire now, imagine the echo of footsteps through the leaves, the soft rustling of branches, and the delicate art of hunting, how every step in the forest was calculated, how the animals were respected, and how their offerings fed entire tribes. These weren't just hunting trips, they were essential rituals that connected people to the animals they relied on for survival. The relationship wasn't exploitative, it was symbiotic, built on respect and balance. The air grows colder as the night deepens, and your thoughts turn toward the hunt. You can almost feel the tension in the air as you prepare yourself to venture deeper into the wilderness, following the ancient paths used by the ancestors of Native American tribes. Imagine, if you will, the sense of focus and stillness that accompanies the hunt. Each step is measured, each breath controlled. The forest, which seemed so alive earlier, now feels quiet, almost waiting. The practice of hunting was more than just a means of obtaining food, it was a sacred ritual, woven into the very fabric of Native American life. For many tribes, the hunt was a communal activity, one that involved the entire community, from the young to the elders. The goal wasn't just to catch the animals, but to honor them. There was a deep reverence for the creatures that provided sustenance, a recognition that the animals, too, were part of the natural world and worthy of respect. The hunt itself was a multifaceted skill, requiring not only an intimate understanding of animal behavior, but also a deep knowledge of the land. How did you track a deer? What signs could you read in the environment to show you where the animals had passed? Native Americans were masters of observation, and their ability to understand animal patterns, movements, and even the sounds of the forest was unparalleled. The skill of tracking was passed down through generations, refined and perfected over time. Every animal, every creature, had its own rhythm, and Native Americans learned to work within those rhythms. One of the most iconic and important animals in the Native American diet was the bison. Historians still argue about the methods used for bison hunting, but one thing is clear: it was no small task. Bison were massive, powerful animals that roamed the plains in herds, their great size and strength making them difficult to hunt. But for the plains tribes, the bison was more than just a food source, it was a lifeline. Every part of the animal was used, from the meat to the bones, the skin to the sinew. The bison was a symbol of abundance, and it wasn't just for eating, it was woven into the spiritual practices of many tribes. In some cases, the bison was hunted in a group, with tribes using coordinated techniques to corral the animals into areas where they could be more easily taken down. In other cases, More individual hunters might use weapons such as bows and arrows, spears, or even traps. But no matter the method, the hunt was always a communal activity, often accompanied by rituals and prayers to ensure a successful outcome and to thank the animal for its sacrifice. There was a deep sense of gratitude for the life taken, and the hunt was often accompanied by ceremonies to honor the spirit of the bison and the other animals that provided for the people. Beyond the bison, many Native American tribes relied on other large game animals like deer and elk. These animals provided important sources of protein, fat, and nutrients. The hunting of deer was often done with the use of bows and arrows, with hunters waiting patiently in strategic positions to take down their prey. The meat would be carefully prepared, whether it was roasted, dried, or smoked and used in a variety of dishes. Even the bones and antlers had practical uses, from creating tools to crafting art. And then, of course, there were the smaller game animals, rabbits, squirrels, and birds, those that were easier to track, trap, and hunt. While these animals didn't provide the sheer quantity of meat that larger game did, they were an important part of the diet and, importantly, could be hunted more frequently when the larger animals were less abundant. Snares and traps were often used to capture these smaller animals, providing a consistent source of protein. Historians and anthropologists have long marveled at the intricacy of the traps and snares used by Native Americans, which were made from materials gathered from the land, such as twigs, vines, and animal sinew. These traps were not just functional, they were evidence of a deep understanding of the natural world. There was an art to using traps and snares, one that required patience and a finely honed skill set. It wasn't just about catching the animal. It was about understanding its behavior, knowing where it would likely travel, and placing the trap in exactly the right spot. Native American hunters could spend hours or even days setting up their traps, ensuring that the prey would be captured safely and efficiently. It was, in a way, a quiet partnership between the hunter and the hunted, with both relying on the other for survival. But the hunt wasn't only about food, it was about the connection to the land, to the animals, and to the larger spiritual forces at play. For many Native American tribes, the hunt was a sacred act that transcended the physical world. It was a way of connecting with the natural world, a means of honoring the animals that had given their lives to sustain human life. It was through this connection that many tribes found balance, not only in their diets but in their spirits. As you sit there by the fire, listening to the crackling of the flames, you begin to feel the weight of it all. The knowledge, the skills, the respect for the land, all of it comes together in this moment. The animals, the plants, the seasons, they all play their part in sustaining life. And while survival in the wilderness is undoubtedly hard, there's a certain beauty in the way the Native Americans found a deep, lasting connection with the earth around them. As the flames die down and the night air grows colder, you can't help but feel a sense of awe for the generations before, who learned to live in harmony with the land, finding sustenance where others might have seen only wilderness. The night air is chilly, the sound of the fire crackling in the background, and your thoughts shift to another crucial part of survival, what you can find from the land itself. The wilderness is full of hidden treasures, often overlooked by those who don't know where to look. For the Native Americans, though, nothing was taken for granted. Survival wasn't just about big game hunting or fishing in rivers, it was about everything around them, down to the tiniest plants that could be used for food, medicine, or even tools. Let's start with something that you probably wouldn't even think twice about today: the wild plants that Native Americans foraged from the land. Imagine walking through a forest filled with bushes, trees, and shrubs, and yet what you notice most is the bounty that the earth offers. It's as though the plants are speaking to you, each one telling you exactly how it could be used. In fact, Native Americans were able to identify hundreds of plants, many of which are still important in modern-day herbal medicine and cooking. A mainstream historical fact that often gets overlooked is just how essential wild plants were to the Native American diet. Native Americans didn't just rely on corn, beans, and squash. They understood that a variety of other plants could provide nutrients, and these were often the difference between surviving and thriving. Many tribes developed sophisticated knowledge of edible wild plants, from roots to berries. Some of the most important wild plants were ones like wild potatoes, Jerusalem artichokes, and cattails, which provided much-needed carbohydrates and vitamins. These plants weren't just for survival, they were part of the daily meals, often found in stews, soups, or simply roasted over the fire. Wild berries were another key part of the Native American diet. From strawberries to raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries, these small, sweet fruits were collected and eaten fresh when in season, or they were preserved by drying, which allowed them to be eaten throughout the year. The berries weren't just a tasty treat either. Many contained antioxidants and vitamins that were vital in maintaining health, especially during the harsh winter months when fresh produce was unavailable. Scholars still debate whether berries were seen as a luxury or a necessity, but one thing is clear: they were a treasured food source in the wilderness. You might be surprised to learn just how much knowledge went into understanding which plants were safe to eat and which weren't. Many of these plants required careful preparation before they could be eaten. Take the humble acorn, for example. Acorns, abundant in many areas, were a vital food source but required extensive preparation to make them palatable. The process of leaching the bitter tannins out of the acorns was a labor-intensive task, but it was a technique that was well worth the effort. The acorn flour was used to make everything from breads to porridge, and the nuts themselves provided essential fats. For many tribes, acorns were more than just a backup food, they were a primary staple during times of scarcity. But the bounty of wild plants wasn't just about food. Many plants also served medicinal purposes. The vast array of plants that Native Americans utilized for healing is astonishing. From willow bark, used as an ancient form of aspirin, to echinacea, which was used for treating infections, plants were seen not only as a source of nourishment, but also as a way to heal the body. It's a testament to the depth of their connection with nature that these plants were not only food but also life-saving resources. A quirky tidbit that might surprise you is the way some Native American tribes used plants in ways that might seem strange to us today. For instance, the Cherokee used the inner bark of the slippery elm tree to make a kind of nutritious, healing porridge. This porridge was consumed not only for its nourishment, but also for its ability to soothe digestive ailments. The slippery elm tree wasn't the only plant to find its place in their diet and medicine cabinets. Plants like yucca and wild ginger were used as both food and medicine, depending on the situation. Historians still argue about the ways in which different tribes in different regions utilized plants in their diets. Some argue that the knowledge was universal among all Native Americans, while others suggest that the types of plants and the ways in which they were prepared varied widely across different tribes and geographic locations. But one thing remains constant: the deep respect and understanding that Native Americans had for the plants they depended on. They knew which plants could heal wounds, which ones could calm a fever, and which could nourish them through the long winter months. As you sit beside the fire, the smell of roasting roots and dried herbs lingering in the air, it becomes clear that the connection to the land wasn't just about survival, it was about respect. Every plant, every root, every leaf was a teacher, offering its wisdom to those who were willing to listen. Native Americans understood this symbiotic relationship with the land better than anyone else, and that wisdom was passed down through generations, ensuring that the people could not only survive but live in harmony with the environment. You're surrounded by a vast wilderness, and it's easy to imagine yourself lost in this world. But if you had the knowledge of the Native Americans, you would know that the land is anything but barren. From the smallest root to the tallest tree, the earth is full of life and sustenance. Survival here is not just about enduring, it's about thriving, learning, and adapting to the rhythms of nature. As the cool night deepens and you sit under a blanket of stars, your mind turns to the waters that run through this land, the rivers, lakes, and streams. In a world where fresh water is scarce and food is often hard to find, the rivers provided both sustenance and lifeblood. You can hear the soft rush of water as it moves through the wilderness, a constant presence in the lives of many Native American tribes. For them, the rivers were not just sources of water, they were essential highways of life, offering fish and other aquatic creatures that were vital to their survival. Fish, especially in regions near water, played a key role in the Native American diet. For those living along the Pacific Northwest coast, the abundance of fish, particularly salmon, was a cornerstone of their food system. Salmon was not just a meal, it was a cultural touchstone, woven deeply into the fabric of their communities. Each year, as the salmon returned to their spawning grounds, tribes would prepare for the harvest. The salmon run was an event that brought together entire villages, who would fish together, celebrate, and honor the fish for their role in sustaining life. A mainstream historical fact that many overlook is the incredible knowledge Native Americans had of fishing techniques. They weren't just using simple fishing rods or nets, they developed sophisticated methods for catching fish that were both effective and sustainable. Native American tribes along the Pacific coast used a variety of fishing techniques, including weirs, carefully constructed stone structures that funneled fish into traps along with spears and traps. In some cases, they even built intricate systems of fish ladders to help the salmon navigate their way upstream, ensuring that the next generation could be harvested in turn. These methods were not only practical but reflected a deep understanding of fish biology, migration patterns, and the delicate balance required to keep the ecosystem intact. Historians still debate whether the early fish preservation techniques developed by Native Americans were influenced by European settlers, or if they were independently created. However, it's clear that these preservation practices were highly effective. Fish were often dried or smoked, which allowed the tribes to store them for the winter months when fresh fish were unavailable. This preserved fish could be used in a variety of ways: steamed, dried, or ground into meal to be added to stews or soups. In the same way that bison was dried and preserved for long-term use, fish played a similar role in the survival of Native American tribes living along rivers and coastlines. As you reflect on the role of fish in the Native American diet, you begin to see the interconnectedness of it all. Fish weren't just food, they were central to community life. Fishing was often a communal activity that involved multiple members of the tribe working together to catch, process, and preserve the fish. For many tribes, fishing was also deeply spiritual, with prayers and rituals performed to honor the fish and the spirits of the water. The relationship with the fish wasn't just about taking, it was about giving thanks, offering respect, and ensuring that the fish would continue to return year after year. It's a reminder that survival in the wilderness was not just about what you could take from the land, it was about maintaining a relationship with the land, and in this case, the waters, that allowed both the people and the fish to thrive. But while fishing was vital, it wasn't always the only food source available, especially for tribes living inland or in regions without easy access to rivers or oceans. For these tribes, survival often depended on other sources of food that didn't come from the water. Still, the knowledge of fish was never far from their minds. In many cases, fish was a treat, a seasonal delicacy that could be enjoyed during the warmer months. Some tribes even had ceremonial fish feasts that marked the arrival of the fish in the rivers, symbolizing abundance, community, and thanks. A quirky tidbit that many might not realize is the importance of clams and shellfish along the coasts. In some regions, these shellfish were just as important as the fish themselves. They were easy to gather, rich in protein, and could be eaten raw or cooked. These bivalves, clams, oysters, and mussels were gathered from the shores, and their shells were used for various purposes as well, from tools to ornaments. There's something deeply satisfying about the thought of pulling clams from the shore and perhaps using them to create tools that would aid in further survival. The deep connection to water and the foods it provided wasn't just for survival, it also influenced Native American social and cultural practices. Communities would gather at specific fishing sites, often with designated leaders and respected elders directing the activity. Fishing was a way of bringing people together, creating bonds within the tribe that were strengthened by the shared experience of bringing food home. In many ways, these gatherings around the water represented not only physical sustenance but also spiritual nourishment. The cycle of the seasons was reflected in the ebb and flow of the fish and the rituals surrounding their catch. The sound of the river becomes more pronounced now as you sit by the fire, and you begin to understand just how important water was to the survival of the Native American tribes. From the earliest settlers to the tribes living today, water has always been at the center of life, nourishing not just the body but also the spirit. The relationship with the rivers, lakes, and oceans was one built on respect, understanding, and balance. Without the rivers, life in the wilderness would have been far more difficult, if not impossible. As you sit in the stillness of the night, the image of the river remains vivid in your mind, a lifeline in the wilderness, connecting all life to the land. The fire crackles gently as the night settles deeper, and your thoughts turn to the ever-changing seasons. In a world where survival depended on the rhythms of nature, understanding the seasons and adapting to them was essential. As you sit here, surrounded by the vastness of the wilderness, you realize that what you eat, when you eat, and how you prepare it, changes as the earth shifts. For Native Americans, the seasons weren't just a backdrop to life, they were its framework, shaping everything from food availability to community practices. In the spring, when the earth is waking up, the land is alive with new growth. The air is fresh, the trees begin to bud, and the first flowers peek through the thawing soil. This was the time of abundance, when the plants that had been dormant through the winter began to come alive again. For many Native American tribes, spring meant foraging for tender shoots, young roots, and early berries. These foods were rich in vitamins and minerals, replenishing the body after the long winter months when fresh produce had been scarce. Wild onions, early greens, and the first berries were some of the first foods to be gathered. In some areas, the first fruits to ripen were strawberries, which would be eaten fresh, their sweet, fragrant flavor signaling the arrival of the warmer months. But this wasn't just about eating the new harvest, it was also a time of preparation. The animals, too, were waking up from their winter slumbers, and springtime meant the return of game animals. Deer, elk, and smaller game began to emerge from their winter hiding places, offering another opportunity for food. Historians still argue whether the early spring months were seen as a time of lean or bounty for different tribes. Some tribes, living in more temperate regions, enjoyed early abundance, while others, especially those in more northern climates, had to wait longer for the full bounty of the land. Still, there was an underlying knowledge that each season had its purpose, and that all would be provided for, in time. As the summer months rolled in, the land reached its fullest potential. The summer months brought heat, long days, and for many tribes the peak of their food harvest. This was the season for fishing, hunting, and gathering in earnest. Berries ripened in abundance, nuts began to fall from the trees, and the larger game animals like bison and deer were more plentiful. Corn, beans, and squash, those three sisters, had all grown tall and sturdy, ready for harvest. The heat of summer also meant it was time to prepare for the future. With the abundance of food, Native Americans would gather and preserve what they could for the colder months ahead. The process of drying, smoking, and storing food took on a new urgency during the summer months, ensuring that there would be enough to survive the harsh winter. This wasn't just about gathering food for sustenance, it was about preparing for times of scarcity. The work done in the summer ensured that the tribe would thrive through the difficult months of fall and winter. Autumn was the season of transition, where the earth began to slow down and the weather cooled. The leaves changed color, signaling the shift toward a time of preparation and reflection. It was a time to gather the last of the harvest and prepare for the scarcity of winter. Wild fruits, like persimmons, huckleberries, and elderberries, were harvested before the frost came. This was also the time when nuts, like acorns and walnuts, were collected and stored. The animals that had provided food throughout the year were now preparing for winter themselves, and the tribes would take advantage of the last hunting opportunities before the cold weather set in. But it wasn't just about gathering food, it was also a time of spiritual reflection. The harvest festivals celebrated in the fall were an integral part of many Native American cultures, with food, music, and ceremonies honoring the land and the animals that had provided for the people. These ceremonies were not just about giving thanks, they were a reminder of the deep interconnectedness between people and the land. A reminder that survival wasn't about control, but about balance. These festivals were a way of reaffirming the people's bond with the earth, ensuring that they would continue to live in harmony with the land for generations to come. And then, of course, there was winter, a time of rest, reflection, and endurance. For many tribes, winter was the hardest time, as food became scarce and survival was an ongoing challenge. The animals that had provided so much during the warmer months were now hibernating, and the land was covered in snow, making hunting and foraging much more difficult. But the preparations made in the warmer months, the dried fish, the smoked meats, the stored grains and nuts, would see the tribe through. These winter months were a test of endurance, but they were also a time for sharing and community. The food that had been gathered and preserved was shared among family and neighbors, ensuring that no one went hungry during the coldest months. As you sit by the fire, imagining the rhythm of the seasons around you, you realize just how crucial it was for Native Americans to understand and adapt to the cycles of nature. The seasons dictated the rhythm of life, from the foods they gathered to the rituals they practiced. Each season had its own role to play in the survival of the people, and by living in sync with the land, Native Americans were able to ensure that their communities thrived, no matter the time of year. So, as the fire crackles and the seasons change outside, remember that for Native Americans, survival in the wilderness was a constant dance with nature. It was about knowing when to rest, when to gather, and when to prepare. Each season brought with it a new set of challenges, but it also brought new opportunities to live in harmony with the land, to give thanks, and to continue the cycle of life. As the chill of the night settles deeper, the thought of surviving through the winter months becomes even more real. In a world where food and warmth were never guaranteed, preparation was everything. For Native Americans, the act of preservation wasn't just about storing food for later. It was an art, a science, and a critical survival strategy. The methods they employed to ensure they had enough to eat throughout the harshest months were as diverse as the regions they inhabited. From drying and smoking to storing in cool, dark places, the process of preserving food was a vital part of their yearly cycle, a tradition passed down through generations. Imagine yourself standing by a fire, watching as fish, meat, and vegetables are carefully smoked. The smell of the wood and the meat blending in the cool air is both comforting and vital. Preservation was a delicate dance between the elements, the right amount of smoke, the right temperature, the right length of time. Over the course of a few days, the meat would transform from fresh to something that could be stored for months, ensuring that when the snow covered the ground and the wind howled outside, there would still be food to eat. Historians still debate how early Native Americans developed these preservation techniques, but it's clear that by the time European settlers arrived, they had mastered the art of drying and smoking food. Fish like salmon were commonly smoked and dried, often hung over a fire or in the open air. This process not only preserved the fish but also concentrated its nutrients, creating a powerful, protein-rich food source that could last through the coldest months. This practice wasn't just limited to fish meat from game animals like deer, elk, and even bison was also preserved in this way. The importance of drying food cannot be overstated. In regions where winters were long and food was scarce, dried fish, meat, and vegetables were crucial for survival. In some cases, dried foods would be stored in cool, dry places like caves or cellars to keep them fresh. Other tribes would use animal skins or woven baskets to hold the dried food, ensuring it was protected from the elements. The process of drying didn't just ensure there would be enough food, it also allowed for easier transportation. Dried meats could be carried on long journeys, ensuring that food was always within reach, even in the most remote areas. A quirky tidbit worth noting is the method used to preserve vegetables. Some Native American tribes would ferment certain vegetables, a technique that not only preserved the food but also made it more digestible. For example, they would ferment corn, creating a sour, tangy dish that provided a burst of flavor and nutrients during the long winter months. This fermented corn, known as hominy, was often mixed with beans or meat to create hearty stews and soups that could be eaten throughout the cold months. But preservation wasn't only about food, it was also about ensuring that the tools needed for hunting and gathering were ready for the harsh winter. Animal hides, used for clothing and shelter, needed to be prepared and stored properly to withstand the cold. Native Americans used intricate methods to tan and preserve hides, ensuring that they would last through the winter and beyond. The process of preparing hides was an important part of winter preparation, as it ensured that the people would have warm clothing and shelter when the weather turned. While much of the focus on preservation techniques revolves around food, it's important to remember that Native Americans preserved not just for survival, but for sustainability. The act of drying, smoking, fermenting, and storing wasn't just a way to keep food for later, it was a way to ensure that the land's resources were used wisely and that the food could be replenished in the seasons to come. Each season, each harvest, was treated with respect. By preparing for the winter in this way, Native Americans ensured that they could live off the land without depleting it, creating a system of cyclical abundance rather than scarcity. As you sit by the fire, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the coolness of the night air, it becomes clear just how deeply intertwined survival was with the seasons. The preservation techniques were just one part of the larger picture of life in the wilderness. They weren't just methods for getting through tough times, they were expressions of respect for the land, for the animals, and for the community. In preparing for the winter, Native Americans weren't just thinking about their own survival, they were thinking about the survival of their entire tribe, ensuring that everyone had enough to eat, enough warmth, and enough resources to make it through until spring. And so, as the fire continues to crackle, you realize that survival in the wilderness was a constant cycle, one of preparation, reflection, and respect. The knowledge of what to eat, when to gather, and how to preserve was passed down through generations, ensuring that these traditions would live on. From the careful preparation of food to the sustainable practices of using every part of the animal and plant, the survival strategies of Native Americans were a reflection of their deep connection to the land, a connection that has stood the test of time. The crackling fire casts flickering shadows, the night air growing colder with each passing hour. As the seasons change and the land shifts, the next step in your journey through survival is understanding how the Native Americans prepared their meals. It wasn't just about hunting or foraging, it was about the craft of cooking, an art that spanned generations. In a world where technology didn't exist, cooking was an ancient, intimate process, a blend of knowledge, technique, and of course respect for the resources provided by the land. From open flames to stone ovens, Native American cooking methods were as diverse as the tribes themselves. One of the most fundamental cooking techniques used by many tribes was cooking over an open fire. Imagine the crackle of the fire, the smell of smoke and roasting meat filling the air. The simplicity of cooking over a flame, without the luxury of modern utensils or equipment, was a core part of the Native American food experience. Large game animals like deer or bison would be roasted over the fire, their meat turning rich and smoky, while smaller animals like rabbits or birds would be cooked in pits or on skewers. Historians are still exploring whether cooking over an open fire was a practice shared across all tribes, or whether some tribes, like those in the Southwest, developed unique techniques, such as cooking with hot stones in pit ovens. In the Southwest, for instance, the Pueblo people would dig holes in the ground and line them with hot stones, creating an oven of sorts. The meat or vegetables would be wrapped in leaves and placed over the stones, then covered with earth. This slow cooking method allowed the food to retain moisture and develop deep flavors, making it ideal for tougher cuts of meat. Another important cooking technique that stands out is the use of clay vessels for boiling or stewing food. Native Americans, especially those living in regions where clay was abundant, would make simple, durable pots for cooking. The pots were used for simmering stews made of meat, beans, and vegetables. The process of cooking in clay pots not only helped to preserve the nutrients in the food, but also infused it with the natural flavors of the materials, creating meals that were hearty, filling, and nourishing. A surprising culinary tidbit is that some Native American tribes had the clever practice of cooking their food in a method known as ash baking. This technique involved placing food directly into the ashes of a fire. The food, whether it was fish, roots, or even corn, would be buried in the hot embers, allowing it to bake slowly in the warmth. The result was a soft, smoky flavor that carried with it the essence of the earth and fire. It was a perfect method for cooking in the wilderness, where the fire itself could provide both the heat and the cooking vessel. Native Americans didn't just cook for sustenance. Food was often at the center of spiritual and social practices. Meals weren't just about eating, they were a time to come together, share stories, and honor the earth. Cooking was an act of gratitude, a way of showing respect for the land and its bounty. Many tribes held feasts and ceremonies surrounding food, using specific foods as offerings to the spirits or as part of rituals meant to ensure a successful harvest, a safe hunt, or good health. The cultural importance of food extended beyond the meal itself. For instance, the Iroquois people often had a tradition known as the Feast of the Dead, where food was prepared in honor of ancestors. It was believed that by sharing a meal with the spirits, the living would receive blessings. Similarly, in the Southwest, many tribes performed ceremonies to honor the plants, animals, and elements that provided for them. Food was not just a necessity, it was a sacred part of life that connected people to the divine, to the land, and to each other. Throughout the winter months, when the land lay dormant, cooking took on an even greater significance. It was during these times that the foods that had been preserved in the warmer months, dried fish, smoked meats, and stored vegetables, were brought out and transformed into hearty stews and soups. The process of cooking these meals became a communal activity, with families gathering around the hearth to share in the warmth of the fire and the food that would sustain them through the long, cold nights. A fascinating aspect of Native American cooking is how each tribe adapted their techniques to the materials available to them. For example, in the northern regions, where wood was plentiful, cooking over an open fire was common. In contrast, the tribes of the Southwest, where wood was scarcer, would often use stone cooking methods, such as heating rocks in a fire and then placing them in food-filled baskets to boil water or cook meat. This clever use of available resources speaks to the ingenuity of Native American peoples and their deep understanding of their environment. As you sit by the fire now, contemplating these ancient cooking practices, you begin to see just how integral food was to the Native American way of life. It wasn't just about survival, it was about community, respect, and spiritual connection. Every meal prepared, every method used, was a reflection of their bond with the earth. And as you think about how these techniques were passed down through generations, you realize that they weren't just preserving food, they were preserving culture, traditions, and a way of life that continues to inspire and inform us today. As the fire flickers and the night grows deeper, you think about the creatures of the wilderness, the animals that roamed the forests, the plains, and the rivers. They were more than just food sources to the Native American people. To them, the animals were sacred, respected, and even revered. Each hunt, each encounter with an animal, was viewed not just as a means of survival, but as a spiritual event, where gratitude was offered for the life taken. This connection to the animals, and the importance of understanding the delicate balance of nature, was central to the Native American way of life. A mainstream historical fact that might surprise many is just how comprehensive the Native American knowledge of animal behavior was. They didn't simply hunt for food. They knew how to track and predict animal movements with uncanny accuracy. From the mighty bison to the smaller, elusive animals like rabbits, squirrels, and birds, Native Americans had a profound understanding of the creatures that lived alongside them. The knowledge of where to find animals, when to hunt them, and how to approach them was passed down through generations, evolving with the land and its changing patterns. One of the most iconic animals in the Native American diet was the bison. It's easy to imagine these great herds, stretching as far as the eye can see, roaming the open plains. The bison was more than just a source of food, it was the lifeblood of many plains tribes. The meat provided protein, the skin was used for clothing and shelter, and the bones and sinew were crafted into tools, weapons, and even musical instruments. The relationship between the bison and the tribes was symbiotic, with every part of the animal being utilized. Historians still debate whether the arrival of European settlers impacted the bison population, and how much this decline affected the tribes that relied on them. Some argue that Native Americans had developed sustainable hunting practices that allowed bison populations to thrive for centuries, while others suggest that the widespread hunting by settlers and the near eradication of the bison in the 19th century was the primary cause of its downfall. Regardless, it's clear that bison were integral to the survival of the tribes, and their disappearance marked a profound shift in the way of life for many Native American peoples. But the bison wasn't the only animal central to Native American life. Deer, elk, and moose were also important sources of food. In the woodlands and forests, where the bison roamed less frequently, deer provided another key source of protein. The hunting techniques used for deer were just as sophisticated as those employed for bison, involving tracking, patience, and deep knowledge of the animal's habits. Native Americans would use bows and arrows, snares, and even decoys to hunt deer, employing tactics that required not only skill, but also an intimate understanding of the animal's behavior. Small game was another staple of the Native American diet. Animals like rabbits, squirrels, raccoons, and birds were hunted regularly and often trapped. These smaller creatures provided a steady supply of meat that was easy to acquire, especially when larger game was scarce. The traps used for these animals were made from natural materials, such as twigs, vines, and animal sinew, demonstrating the resourcefulness and ingenuity of Native American hunters. Some tribes would also use poison-tipped arrows or snares to catch their prey, while others relied on more passive techniques, like using pits or nets to capture birds and small mammals. A quirky tidbit that adds an interesting layer to the story of Native American hunting is the use of the calling method to attract certain animals. For example, hunters would often use vocalizations or sounds to mimic animals in distress, tricking other creatures into approaching. Some tribes were known for their mastery of mimicking the calls of birds, using them to lure in ducks or geese. These hunting calls were not only effective tools but also deeply woven into the spiritual aspects of hunting, echoing the belief that the spirits of the animals guided the hunters. The connection to animals extended beyond the hunt itself. Many Native American cultures viewed certain animals as spiritual guides, their characteristics symbolizing virtues like courage, wisdom, and strength. The wolf, for example, was often seen as a symbol of loyalty and endurance, while the eagle was revered as a messenger of the gods. These animals weren't just part of the physical world, they occupied an important place in the spiritual and cultural realms, influencing ceremonies, rituals, and stories that were shared from one generation to the next. In the early morning, as the sun begins to rise, you can almost feel the pulse of the land around you. The animals stir, the forest awakens, and the hunting cycle begins again. For Native Americans, every hunt was an opportunity to connect with the earth, with the creatures that inhabited it, and with the community they supported. They knew that each animal had its role to play in the intricate web of life. The hunt wasn't just about feeding the body, it was about honoring the animal and ensuring that the cycle of life continued. The animals were not just sources of food, they were part of a larger story, one that tied the people to the land, to the seasons, and to each other. As you sit by the fire, feeling the warmth on your skin, you understand that the survival of the Native American tribes depended on more than just skills. It depended on a deep, profound respect for the natural world and the creatures that shared it. Through their understanding, reverence, and resourcefulness, the Native Americans were able to live in harmony with the wilderness, ensuring their survival through even the harshest times. As the night deepens, the warmth of the fire contrasts with the biting cold of the wilderness. The silence that surrounds you feels vast, yet within that quiet, the wilderness is full of life. The animals, the plants, the rivers, all of these were integral parts of the survival puzzle that Native Americans solved with extraordinary skill and wisdom. But beyond the immediate need for food and shelter, there was another element that sustained life in the wilderness: the ability to adapt to the unpredictable. In a world where resources were often scarce, and the elements unpredictable, foraging for wild plants was as important as hunting or fishing. You can imagine the quiet focus it took to gather the right plants, to know which ones were edible, and which ones could be used for healing or to help maintain health. Every plant had its purpose, from providing nourishment to offering medicinal properties, and many plants had multiple uses. A mainstream historical fact that has often been underappreciated is the depth of knowledge Native Americans had about plant life. Their ability to identify hundreds of edible plants, herbs, and roots, each with its own healing properties or nutritional benefits, was astounding. In fact, many of the plants used by Native Americans continue to be used in modern herbal medicine today. Plants like echinacea, for example, were used by Native Americans long before they became a staple in modern wellness practices for their immune-boosting properties. Foraging wasn't just a seasonal activity, it was a continual process that changed as the land shifted through the seasons. In the spring, when fresh greens were abundant, Native Americans would harvest early shoots, dandelion greens, and wild garlic. These plants provided vital nutrients and helped replenish the body after the long winter months, when fresh food was scarce. But spring wasn't just about fresh greens. Roots were also dug up, like those of wild carrots and parsnips, which could be eaten raw or cooked into hearty meals. As summer rolled in, berries became a staple in the Native American diet. From blueberries to blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries, these small fruits were rich in antioxidants, vitamins, and natural sugars. They were eaten fresh, dried, or preserved in syrup. Historians still argue whether the Native Americans' method of drying berries and other fruits was influenced by European preservation techniques or if it was an independent development. Regardless, drying berries was a key method of ensuring that the fruits could be enjoyed during the long winter months when fresh food was harder to come by. A quirky tidbit you might not expect is the way some Native American tribes used plants not only for food or medicine, but also for tools and materials. For example, the fibers from certain plants, like yucca and nettle, were used to create ropes, baskets, and even sandals. These materials weren't just useful, they were essential for daily life. The fibers could be twisted into twine, woven into mats, or crafted into fishing nets, showcasing how resourceful and deeply attuned Native Americans were to the land around them. While foraging for wild plants was crucial, there was another aspect of plant life that was just as important: the role of plants in medicine. Many Native American tribes had a deep understanding of the healing properties of plants, knowing exactly which ones to use for ailments, from fever to wounds. Willow bark, for example, was used to treat pain and inflammation long before aspirin was synthesized in the modern world. The bark of the black cherry tree was used as a cough remedy, while sage and lavender were used to ease headaches and calm the nerves. Some plants, like the root of the devil's club plant, were believed to have spiritual significance, used in rituals or ceremonies to purify and protect the body and spirit. These medicinal practices weren't just about physical health, they were about maintaining a sense of balance and harmony within the body and the world. For Native Americans, food and medicine were inseparable. They understood that the right plant, consumed at the right time, could both heal and nourish, allowing them to survive in the wilderness and thrive despite the challenges they faced. Historians still debate whether all tribes had the same knowledge of medicinal plants or whether there were regional differences in plant use. Some tribes may have had access to a wider variety of plants, depending on the geographical area they inhabited. However, it's clear that the knowledge of medicinal plants was passed down carefully, generation by generation, ensuring that every tribe had the resources to heal when illness struck. As you sit by the fire, imagining the quiet of the wilderness and the wealth of knowledge that was hidden in every leaf, root, and berry, you realize that survival wasn't just about what you could kill or catch. It was about understanding the land on a deeper level. It was about knowing which plants could heal, which could nourish, and which could help you survive the harshest conditions. The Native Americans' connection to the land was profound, and their knowledge of the natural world was vast. They didn't just live off the land, they lived in partnership with it, learning to work with nature rather than fight against it. As the night stretches on and the fire slowly burns down to embers, your thoughts turn to another remarkable aspect of Native American survival: the ability to make use of everything the land had to offer. The wilderness wasn't just a place to hunt, forage, and gather, it was a treasure trove of materials that could be transformed into everything from tools to clothing. Every element of nature was utilized, and nothing went to waste. The Native Americans' ability to extract resources from the earth and craft them into objects of necessity is a testament to their ingenuity and deep connection to the land. Take, for example, the bones of animals. While the meat provided sustenance, the bones were often repurposed into tools. Bone was carved into needles, fish hooks, scrapers, and arrowheads, objects essential for both survival and the continuation of daily life. Deer bones, in particular, were prized for their durability and flexibility, and many tribes became expert bone carvers, creating tools that were both functional and beautifully crafted. The use of bone as a material wasn't limited to tools either. It was sometimes used in decorative pieces or in ceremonial objects, reflecting the spiritual importance of every part of the animal. The sinew of animals, often found in the tendons, was another incredibly valuable resource. It was harvested from animals like deer, bison, and elk, and was used for making string, thread, and even rope. This sinew was incredibly strong and flexible, making it ideal for stitching together hides to create clothing, shelters, and moccasins. It was also used for bowstrings and other essential equipment. The process of preparing sinew was labor-intensive, but the end result was invaluable. Without this natural material, many of the tools, clothing, and weapons that Native Americans relied on wouldn't have been possible. The hides of animals were, of course, one of the most essential resources. Beyond the meat, the fur and skin of animals were used for clothing, shelter, and even bedding. Bison, in particular, was revered for its thick hide, which was used to create everything from warm clothing to durable tents. The process of tanning hides was intricate and required knowledge of both the materials and the environment. Some tribes used the brains of the animals as part of the tanning process, softening the leather and making it more pliable. Others used the sun to dry the hides, ensuring they would be tough enough to withstand the elements. Historians still debate the full extent of how different tribes employed these techniques, and whether these practices were shared or unique to particular groups. Some suggest that the Plains tribes were particularly adept at using bison for nearly every part of their survival, while others argue that the Arctic tribes, who depended on seals, had similarly comprehensive knowledge of how to use every part of the animal. What remains clear, however, is that Native Americans were masters of resourcefulness, using the land and its creatures to their fullest potential. A quirky tidbit worth mentioning is the use of animal bladders. While it might sound unusual, the bladder of larger animals like bison or deer was often used as a water container. The bladder was cleaned, preserved, and then filled with water, making it a surprisingly effective and portable vessel for carrying liquids. In fact, the ingenuity with which Native Americans repurposed every part of the animals they hunted was nothing short of remarkable. Animal bladders, bones, and sinew were transformed into practical items that ensured the tribe's survival and comfort. In addition to animal products, plant materials were also used extensively in Native American crafting. The fibers from plants like the yucca, nettle, and agave were woven into strong cords, ropes, and baskets. These plants provided the materials for a range of everyday items, from fishing nets to storage containers, and even footwear. The fibers of these plants were sometimes so durable that they could be used to craft tools and weapons as well. The craft of weaving and making baskets was highly regarded in many tribes, and the quality of a woven basket could signify the skill of the maker. These baskets weren't just for carrying items, they were sometimes used in ceremonies or as decorative objects, further emphasizing the dual role of these materials in both practical and spiritual contexts. You might also be surprised to learn that even plant matter, like bark and leaves, had valuable uses. Birch bark, for example, was used extensively by many tribes, particularly in the Northeast, to make canoes, roofing, and even containers. The bark was flexible and waterproof, making it an ideal material for crafting items that needed to withstand the elements. In some cases, entire houses were built from the bark of trees, and canoes made from birch bark allowed tribes to travel easily along waterways, connecting them to trade networks and other communities. As you sit beside the fading fire, imagining the craftwork that went into each tool, garment, and structure, it becomes clear just how much knowledge and respect went into every aspect of Native American survival. Every material used, whether it came from the earth, the water, or the animals, was treated with reverence. It wasn't just about taking, it was about using what was needed, in balance with the natural world, ensuring that every resource was used to its fullest potential, without exploitation. For the Native Americans, survival wasn't just about knowing how to find food, shelter, and tools, it was about understanding the land in such a deep and profound way that nothing went to waste. Every part of the animal, every plant, every natural resource had its place in the circle of life. The wisdom passed down through generations ensured that nothing was overlooked and that survival was a sustainable and harmonious act. This deep connection to the land and its resources enabled them to not only survive in the wilderness, but to thrive, living in balance with the environment and using their knowledge to sustain their communities for generations. The night has settled into a deep calm, the fire now just embers casting a soft glow on the surrounding wilderness. As you sit, immersed in the quiet, your thoughts turn to the larger, often invisible, forces that shaped survival for Native Americans. It wasn't just the knowledge of the land, the plants, and the animals that sustained them, it was the way they interacted with the environment. It was about balance, respect, and the acknowledgement that survival depended on maintaining harmony between the people and the earth. For many Native American tribes, the idea of balance extended far beyond the immediate need to gather food and shelter. It was embedded in their worldview, in their understanding that every action had consequences, and that the land, animals, and people were all interconnected. This belief didn't just guide their survival, it shaped their entire way of life. They knew that they were not separate from the land, they were part of it. This relationship, this deep, spiritual connection to the earth, was the foundation of their survival strategy. Take, for example, the practice of controlled burning. Native Americans understood the importance of fire in maintaining the health of the land. In some regions, tribes would intentionally set fires to clear underbrush, promote the growth of certain plants, or even to drive animals toward hunting grounds. This practice wasn't just about manipulating the environment, it was about nurturing the land to create the conditions needed for survival. Historians still debate the full extent of controlled burning practices across different tribes, but it's clear that fire was a tool used to maintain the health of both the land and its inhabitants. In the Great Plains, where vast grasslands stretched as far as the eye could see, fire was a natural part of the ecosystem. Native Americans understood that periodic fires helped rejuvenate the soil and promote the growth of plants that were crucial for both human and animal life. The smoke from the fire would travel across the plains, signaling the return of fresh growth, which in turn would attract grazing animals like bison and deer. The fire, then, played an important role in not only maintaining the ecosystem, but also in ensuring the survival of the tribes that relied on those animals for food. A fascinating example of this symbiotic relationship is seen in the way the Plains tribes utilized fire to shape their environment. Some tribes would burn areas of the grasslands in a controlled manner to encourage the growth of specific plants that provided food for both humans and animals. The fire would also help clear the land, making it easier to hunt bison and other game. This intentional use of fire showed a deep understanding of ecological systems, far beyond what many might assume. It wasn't about destroying the land, it was about maintaining its balance and fostering abundance. But it wasn't just fire that played a role in this balance, it was the understanding of the seasons, the careful observation of the natural world, and the sustainable use of resources. Native Americans practiced hunting and gathering in ways that ensured that the land would continue to provide. They understood that taking too much from the earth could lead to scarcity, which is why hunting, fishing, and foraging were done with care and respect. For example, many tribes would hunt only what they needed, ensuring that they didn't deplete the population of any particular species. The hunting of bison, for example, was often done with great reverence. The entire tribe would take part in the hunt, using every part of the animal for food, clothing, tools, and shelter. Nothing was wasted, and the hunt itself was seen as a spiritual act, honoring the animal for its sacrifice. Historians still debate the environmental impact of Native American practices on the land. Some argue that their sustainable practices allowed ecosystems to thrive, while others suggest that their practices contributed to changes in the landscape over time. Regardless, what is clear is that the Native Americans understood their place in the world and lived with a deep respect for the natural forces around them. Their way of life was one of stewardship, not dominance. They didn't see themselves as separate from the environment, they saw themselves as part of it. A quirky tidbit to consider is the way Native American tribes used natural resources not just for practical needs but for spiritual purposes as well. For instance, many tribes used herbs like sage, sweetgrass, and cedar in smudging ceremonies, rituals that involved burning these plants to cleanse spaces and individuals, creating a sense of spiritual balance. These practices were a reminder that the natural world wasn't just a source of sustenance, it was a source of spiritual connection and healing. The very air, the earth, the plants, and the animals were seen as sacred. Their role in survival wasn't just physical, it was deeply spiritual. As you sit by the fire, surrounded by the stillness of the wilderness, you realize that survival wasn't just about the body, it was about the soul, the mind, and the spirit. The way Native Americans lived in harmony with the land, using everything it provided and honoring it in return, was a testament to their wisdom and understanding of the delicate balance of life. Their survival strategies went beyond food and shelter, they were about living with the land, in sync with its rhythms and cycles. In many ways, their approach to life was the ultimate lesson in sustainability. They didn't take more than they needed. They didn't exploit the land, they nurtured it. And by doing so, they ensured not only their survival, but the survival of the land and its creatures for generations to come. As the fire dies down and the wilderness returns to its quiet, you understand that survival in the wilderness was more than just a physical feat. It was a spiritual practice, a way of life that balanced both the practical and the sacred. As the final embers of the fire fade and the cool night air settles, you reflect on the extraordinary depth of knowledge that allowed Native Americans to thrive in the wilderness. The relationship they shared with nature wasn't just about surviving through each season, it was about living in balance with the earth, understanding the subtle cues of the environment, and using resources in a way that didn't disrupt the natural cycles. This sustainable lifestyle was a reflection of their profound connection to the land, a bond that stretched far beyond the practical aspects of survival. One of the most striking aspects of Native American survival was their resourcefulness. Every material that could be found in the environment was used with care, purpose, and respect. Even in the harshest conditions, Native Americans were able to make use of what was at hand. From the tools they crafted to the shelter they built, every object had multiple uses, ensuring that nothing was wasted and that the environment provided for their needs without overexploitation. A mainstream historical fact that may surprise many is how Native Americans built their shelters. While we often think of nomadic tribes living in teepees or wigwams, these structures were not simply temporary shelters, they were carefully designed to meet the needs of the people, adapted to the environment in which they lived. For example, the Plains tribes, who followed the bison herds across vast stretches of land, used teepees that could be easily assembled and dismantled, allowing them to move quickly in search of food. These teepees were made from buffalo hides, which were both lightweight and durable, ideal for a mobile lifestyle. The structure of the teepee itself was designed to withstand wind and rain, with its cone shape providing excellent protection from the elements. On the other hand, in the colder regions of the north and northeast, tribes built sturdier, more permanent structures. The Iroquois, for instance, lived in longhouses made of wood, bark, and other plant materials. These longhouses were not just homes, they were community spaces where multiple families lived together, sharing warmth, resources, and daily life. The longhouses were designed to be insulated from the harsh winter cold, with thick layers of bark and earth covering the roof to keep the inside warm and dry. The use of natural materials in construction wasn't just practical, it was a reflection of their belief in the interconnectedness of all things. The longhouse, like the teepee, was a sustainable structure that made the most of the available resources, creating a home that was both functional and respectful of the environment. A quirky tidbit that often goes unnoticed is how Native Americans utilized the land in ways that were not only sustainable, but also strategically intelligent. For instance, many tribes were experts in creating food caches, stores of food hidden or stored in secret locations, to ensure that they had enough to eat during times of scarcity. These caches were often located in areas that were hard to access, hidden beneath piles of leaves or in the trunks of trees. This practice was a survival strategy, allowing tribes to have reserves of food when conditions were particularly harsh or when food was harder to find. These caches were just one example of the ingenuity Native Americans used to ensure survival. They understood that life in the wilderness was unpredictable, that seasons could be harsh and resources could be scarce. But rather than relying on luck, they prepared. They harvested plants at their peak, dried meat and fish to last through the winter, and stored seeds for the next planting season. In this way, survival was not just about enduring the present, it was about preparing for the future, ensuring that when times were tough, the tribe could continue to live in harmony with the land. The wisdom embedded in these practices wasn't just about the survival of individuals, it was about the survival of the community. The interconnectedness of people, plants, animals, and the land was at the heart of Native American survival strategies. They didn't view the land as something to be conquered. Instead, they saw it as a partner in their journey, one to be respected and cared for. This deep respect for the earth is why so many Native American tribes practiced sustainable hunting, fishing, and foraging. They knew that the land was a gift, one that could provide for them as long as they cared for it in return. As you sit in the quiet of the night, surrounded by the dark stillness of the wilderness, you begin to grasp the full meaning of this connection. For Native Americans, survival wasn't just about physical strength or intelligence, it was about living in a way that maintained balance, in every sense of the word. It was about using what was needed, not more. It was about taking only what the earth could provide, and ensuring that it could continue to provide in the future. This philosophy of respect, sustainability, and balance created a way of life that lasted for generations, allowing Native Americans to thrive in the wilderness for thousands of years. Today, many of the lessons learned by Native Americans are being rediscovered. As we face the challenges of climate change, resource depletion, and environmental degradation, there is much we can learn from the practices that allowed Native Americans to live in harmony with the earth. Their deep knowledge of the land, their sustainable practices, and their understanding of the interconnectedness of all things can help guide us toward a future where we live in balance with nature once more. The fire has almost burned down to nothing now, the embers glowing softly in the quiet night. As you sit there, surrounded by the wilderness, you realize that the true lesson of survival in the wilderness isn't just about what you know or what you can do, it's about how you live, how you connect to the world around you, and how you ensure that the world will continue to provide for those who come after you. The fire is nearly out now, and the silence of the wilderness has deepened into something almost sacred. The world around you seems to hold its breath, as if the land itself is reflecting on the stories that have been told, the wisdom passed down, and the deep connection between humans and nature. As you sit there bathed in the last glow of the embers, you can't help but marvel at how much survival in the wilderness depended on the knowledge, respect, and ingenuity of the Native American peoples. Every aspect of their lives was shaped by an understanding of the land that allowed them to not just survive, but to thrive, generation after generation. One of the most striking things about Native American survival was the role that community played. It wasn't just individuals who were responsible for surviving in the wilderness, it was the entire tribe. The community worked together to gather food, build shelters, and raise children, ensuring that no one was left behind. This communal approach to survival wasn't limited to physical needs either. Emotional and spiritual well-being were also shared, with rituals and ceremonies that brought people together, strengthened bonds, and helped everyone maintain a sense of purpose and connection. In many ways, the survival of Native American tribes depended on this interconnectedness. Whether they were hunting together, preparing food, or caring for the sick, each person played a role in ensuring the well-being of the group. The knowledge passed down from generation to generation was a collective effort, a shared wisdom that had been honed over thousands of years. This wisdom wasn't just about how to track animals or grow crops, it was about how to live in harmony with the world around you, how to understand the rhythms of nature, and how to work together to ensure that the community thrived. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this communal survival is the way many Native American tribes organized their communities. The Iroquois Confederacy, for example, was a remarkable example of a political and social system that emphasized cooperation and unity. The 6 nations of the Iroquois, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora formed a loose confederacy based on mutual aid and shared governance. Decisions were made collectively, with each nation having a voice in the process. This system of governance was based on the idea that survival wasn't just about the strength of any one individual or group, but about the strength of the collective. It was a system that ensured every member of the tribe had a stake in the future, ensuring that no one was left out of decisions that affected their survival. Another essential element of survival was the way Native American tribes passed down their knowledge. This knowledge wasn't written down, it was shared orally, through stories, songs, and teachings that were passed from elder to younger generations. These stories weren't just about history, they were about survival. They taught lessons about hunting, gathering, building, and living in harmony with the land. They were also about values, about respect for nature, for the animals, and for each other. The elders' role was not just to teach survival skills, but to guide the younger generation on how to live well, ensuring that the knowledge of survival was carried forward. A quirky tidbit you might not expect is that many Native American cultures had ways of teaching survival skills that were both practical and spiritual. For example, many tribes used storytelling not just to pass down knowledge, but to instill a sense of moral responsibility. Stories about the trickster figure Coyote, for instance, weren't just entertaining, they were lessons in humility, the dangers of selfishness, and the importance of living in harmony with nature. These stories often contained hidden lessons about survival, teaching listeners how to deal with adversity, how to respect the environment, and how to work together for the good of the tribe. This spiritual connection to survival wasn't limited to just human interactions. The animals, plants, and natural elements all had a role in the tribal worldview. The idea of balance wasn't just a practical tool, it was a spiritual one. Every animal, every plant, and every natural element had its place in the world, and survival meant understanding and respecting those roles. The bison, for example, was seen as a sacred animal that provided for the people. The hunt wasn't just about feeding the tribe, it was about honoring the animal and its contribution to the survival of the people. The same principle applied to plants and trees. Many Native American cultures held certain trees like the oak or the cedar in reverence, seeing them as providers and protectors. Historians still debate the extent to which these spiritual beliefs affected the actual survival strategies of Native American tribes. Some suggest that the spiritual connection to animals and plants helped to create a culture of sustainability, one that ensured that the land was never overexploited. Others argue that spiritual beliefs were more symbolic than practical. Regardless, one thing is clear. Survival in the wilderness was not just about the physical act of gathering food and building shelter. It was about living in a way that respected the earth, acknowledged the interconnectedness of all things, and ensured that future generations could live as the ancestors had. As the embers of the fire flicker one last time, you realize that the lessons learned from Native American survival strategies go far beyond simply knowing what to eat or how to hunt. It's about understanding the rhythms of nature, living in balance with the world around you, and sharing that wisdom with the community. It's about working together, respecting the land, and ensuring that the future is not just about surviving but thriving. The quiet of the wilderness deepens, and as you sit there, bathed in the soft glow of the last embers, you realize that the true key to survival was not just in the tools, the techniques, or the knowledge. It was in the spirit of cooperation, respect, and balance that allowed Native Americans to live in harmony with the earth, sustaining their people and their way of life for generations. The night has fully embraced the wilderness now. The stars a blanket across the sky. The fire's warmth has faded, and the chill of the evening winds whispers across the land. Yet, the stillness around you feels alive, a silent reminder of the land that has provided for centuries. You begin to realize that survival in the wilderness wasn't just about the physical elements, but about the deep, unspoken connection to the environment. For Native Americans, this connection wasn't simply a matter of necessity, it was a way of life, a philosophy that shaped their entire existence. As you think more about this connection, your mind turns to the natural world, the rivers, forests, and mountains that were not only sources of food and shelter, but also symbols of the vastness and interconnectedness of life. Native American tribes viewed the world around them not as something to conquer, but as a living entity to respect and work with. The concept of Mother Earth wasn't merely a poetic ideal, it was a deeply held belief that guided their interactions with the world. They understood that they were a part of the web of life, and that every creature, plant, and element had a role to play in the balance of nature. This profound connection to the earth was reflected in their survival strategies. Unlike many cultures that sought to dominate the land, Native Americans worked with it, drawing on the resources available but never overexploiting them. For example, the practice of rotational hunting allowed animals like bison to regenerate and return to the plains year after year. Rather than hunting continuously in the same areas, tribes would move to different parts of their territory, ensuring that wildlife populations remained sustainable. Similarly, the planting of crops was done with a reverence for the earth's fertility, with many tribes using natural methods of irrigation and crop rotation to protect the soil and maintain its productivity. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this sustainable approach to survival is the concept of the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. These three crops were planted together, not only because they complemented each other nutritionally, but because they worked together to preserve the health of the soil. Corn provided a tall structure for beans to climb, while the beans added nitrogen to the soil, enriching it for the next planting season. the squash spread across the ground, shading the soil and preventing weeds from taking root. This system wasn't just about getting the most out of the land, it was about maintaining a cycle of growth that would continue for generations. Historians still debate the origins of the Three Sisters technique, with some suggesting that it was a natural discovery, while others propose that it was passed down through trade and cultural exchange between different tribes. Regardless of its origins, the Three Sisters were a clear example of Native Americans' understanding of sustainable agriculture and their deep respect for the land. But survival in the wilderness wasn't just about agriculture or hunting, it was also about community. For Native American tribes, survival was a collective effort. The knowledge of the land, the wisdom of the elders, and the strength of the community were all essential parts of the survival equation. Whether it was building shelters, gathering food, or caring for the sick, each member of the tribe had a role to play. The elder generations passed down their knowledge to the younger ones, ensuring that the skills and traditions needed to survive were never lost. This intergenerational knowledge transfer was a cornerstone of Native American survival strategies, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would guide the tribe into the future. A quirky tidbit about these communal practices is the role of storytelling in Native American cultures. Stories weren't just entertainment, they were teaching tools. They conveyed important survival lessons about hunting, gathering, and respect for nature. The story of the trickster, Coyote, for example, might seem like a simple tale of mischief, but it also carried deeper lessons about humility, the consequences of greed, and the importance of balance in all things. These stories weren't just myths, they were practical guides to navigating life in a challenging environment. The oral tradition was central to maintaining cultural continuity, ensuring that survival strategies were passed down and adapted for future generations. As you sit by the fading fire, you realize that the survival of Native American tribes in the wilderness wasn't just about practical knowledge, it was about an entire world view. It was about living in harmony with nature, understanding the rhythms of the earth, and respecting the interconnectedness of all life. Survival was not a solitary pursuit, it was a communal effort, guided by wisdom, reverence, and shared responsibility. It was a way of life that saw humans as part of the natural world, not apart from it. This philosophy allowed Native Americans to thrive in even the harshest conditions, ensuring that they not only survived but lived well. The gentle breeze carries the sounds of the wilderness, and as you reflect on all you've learned, you understand that survival in the wilderness is about much more than just making it through the day. It's about creating a life that's in balance with the earth, where every action, every choice, is made with respect for the land and its resources. It's about working together as a community, passing down knowledge, and ensuring that future generations can live in harmony with the world around them. As the fire dims to a soft glow, you realize that the true meaning of survival isn't just about enduring the elements, it's about living in a way that honors the earth and all its inhabitants. The night has wrapped itself completely around the wilderness now, with only the faintest embers of the fire still flickering. The stars above twinkle in the clear sky, and you sit, still and reflective, as the silence of the earth surrounds you. The journey you've taken through the survival strategies of Native Americans has not just been about understanding how they lived, it's been about understanding how deeply they connected with the natural world. Each lesson, every practice, was a way of ensuring not just survival, but a life lived in harmony with the earth, a life that respected the sacredness of all things. As you sit there, contemplating this profound connection, your mind drifts to one of the most vital aspects of Native American survival: the importance of water. In many ways, water was the lifeblood of survival. It wasn't just something to drink, it was a resource that allowed life to flourish, from the plants that grew to the animals that roamed the land. For many tribes, water was considered a sacred element, a source of both physical sustenance and spiritual significance. A mainstream historical fact that highlights the centrality of water in Native American survival is the way that many tribes developed sophisticated systems for finding and using water. Whether in the deserts of the Southwest or the forests of the Northeast, Native Americans understood the vital importance of water and adapted their practices to ensure they could always find it. In the arid Southwest, for example, the Havasupai and other desert-dwelling tribes built their homes near springs or underground streams, using natural formations to collect and store water. They also built intricate irrigation systems to direct water to their crops, allowing them to grow food in the harshest conditions. In regions where water was abundant, like the Great Lakes or along major rivers, tribes developed methods for utilizing the water not just for drinking but for transportation and fishing. The Anishinaabe people, for example, built canoes that could traverse the many lakes and rivers in their territories, allowing them to fish, trade, and communicate across vast distances. Water wasn't just a resource, it was a highway, a lifeline, and a means of connection to the larger world. Historians still debate whether all tribes had the same access to water resources or whether some tribes had to develop more complex methods for managing water scarcity. In any case, the ability to find and manage water was one of the key survival skills that allowed Native Americans to adapt to diverse environments. The complex understanding of water, its sources, and how to use it sustainably was vital for survival. A quirky tidbit that might surprise you is the use of water in spiritual practices. For many tribes, water was not just a resource to be consumed, it was a spiritual element that could cleanse, heal, and purify. In ceremonies, tribes would use water to wash away impurities, or to bless individuals or objects. In some cultures, rivers, lakes, and even waterfalls were seen as sacred places where the spirit of water could be accessed. The act of gathering water, whether for cooking or for ceremonial purposes, was often accompanied by prayers or rituals that honored the spirit of the water itself. The sacred nature of water extended beyond its spiritual significance to its practical uses in daily life. The use of water for cooking, washing, and even as a source of cooling during hot summer months was essential for survival. Water was also a key element in preserving food, whether it was used to boil meat or vegetables, or to rehydrate dried fish and meat. It was an integral part of every meal, helping to transform dried, preserved foods into nourishing, filling dishes that would sustain the tribe during times of scarcity. As you reflect on the importance of water in the Native American way of life, it becomes clear that survival in the wilderness wasn't just about finding food or building shelter, it was about managing resources wisely, ensuring that what was taken from the earth was used with respect, and maintaining balance with the environment. The understanding of water, as both a physical and spiritual element, was key to this balance. It allowed Native Americans to thrive, not just by ensuring that their bodies were nourished, but by ensuring that their spirits were connected to the earth in a deep and meaningful way. Water, then, was a symbol of life itself, a constant, flowing reminder of the need for balance, for respect, and for understanding. Just as the rivers and lakes nourished the land, so too did the people who lived alongside them, drawing from the water not only for survival, but for the spiritual nourishment that kept them grounded and connected to the world around them. As you sit there, surrounded by the wilderness, the silence becomes profound. The fire has burned low, and the coolness of the night feels soothing against your skin. The knowledge that Native Americans held about the land, the water, the animals, and the seasons wasn't just about surviving, it was about living with purpose. Each moment, each decision, was guided by a respect for the environment that ensured that life would continue, that the natural world would remain balanced, and that future generations would inherit a thriving, sustainable world. Survival in the wilderness was more than just a physical feat. It was a spiritual practice, a deep connection to the earth, and a way of life that taught respect for the land and everything it provided. In this stillness, you understand that true survival isn't just about enduring the world around you, it's about understanding your place in it, living in harmony with nature, and ensuring that your actions honor the earth that sustains you. The night is fully upon you now, the quiet stretching out endlessly. As you sit there, reflecting on the relationship between Native Americans and the land, something profound starts to settle into your mind. Their survival was not just about enduring the wilderness, but about embracing the wilderness. It was about cultivating a symbiotic relationship with the earth that transcended mere survival. For Native Americans, the act of living in the wild was inseparable from the act of living well. Their deep respect for nature wasn't just about taking what was needed, it was about giving back, maintaining balance, and ensuring that future generations could continue to thrive. One of the most remarkable aspects of Native American life was how their survival strategies were closely intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. It wasn't enough to simply use the land for sustenance. They believed that everything in nature had a spirit, a force, and a purpose. The land, the water, the plants, the animals, each element of the earth had its place in the world, and each deserved respect. This spiritual connection to the environment shaped how they lived, hunted, farmed, and interacted with the world around them. Every action, from planting crops to hunting game, was done with the knowledge that it would affect the balance of nature. A mainstream historical fact that sheds light on this relationship is the role of ceremonial rituals in Native American survival. Many tribes had ceremonies tied to their hunting, planting, and harvesting practices. For example, the Plains tribes often performed the sun dance before the bison hunt, believing that the ceremony would bring the tribe success in the hunt and ensure the bison would return in abundance. This wasn't just superstition, it was a way of honoring the animals they depended on, thanking them for their sacrifice, and asking for continued balance with the earth. These ceremonies were a form of spiritual reciprocity, ensuring that the tribe didn't take more than they needed, but rather received what was necessary for survival in a way that maintained harmony with nature. While the specifics of these rituals and ceremonies varied between tribes, the underlying theme was universal. The act of survival was a spiritual practice. Food, water, shelter, these weren't just things that were taken from the earth. They were gifts that needed to be honored and respected so that the earth would continue to provide. In this way, survival was never just about physical endurance. It was about living in alignment with the natural world, understanding that every resource was interconnected and part of a greater whole. Historians still debate the exact role that spirituality played in everyday survival for Native Americans. Some argue that these rituals were essential for maintaining the mental and emotional strength needed to endure in such harsh conditions. Others suggest that these spiritual practices were as practical as they were ceremonial, ensuring that resources were managed carefully and respectfully. Either way, it's clear that these ceremonies were deeply embedded in the fabric of life for many tribes, acting as a constant reminder of the earth's power and the need for balance. A quirky tidbit worth mentioning is the significance of the sacred plants used in these ceremonies. Sage, sweetgrass, tobacco, and cedar, these plants were burned during rituals to purify the air, ward off negative spirits, and bless the participants. The act of burning these sacred plants wasn't just about spiritual purification, it also served a very practical purpose. The smoke helped to keep mosquitoes and other insects at bay during summer ceremonies, and the smell was said to have healing properties, calming the mind and spirit. In this way, the spiritual and practical aspects of life were often inseparable, each serving the other in a continuous cycle of reciprocity. As you sit by the dying embers, you begin to understand just how deeply these spiritual beliefs were woven into every aspect of survival. The act of hunting, fishing, and foraging wasn't just about collecting food, it was about connecting with the land and acknowledging the gift it provided. Even the tools that were used for hunting, such as bows and arrows, were treated with reverence. They were seen not just as instruments of survival, but as sacred objects that carried the energy of the hunter, the spirit of the animal, and the forces of nature. The hunter would often give thanks to their tools before the hunt, and even to the animals they hunted, acknowledging the sacrifice that was made. This spiritual practice extended to all aspects of life: food, shelter, and clothing. The process of gathering and using natural materials, like plants, animal hides, and even stones, was done with the understanding that the earth was providing for the people. Native Americans believed in a reciprocal relationship with the land. They took only what was needed and always gave thanks for what they received. This practice wasn't just about survival, it was about honoring the earth and ensuring that the earth would continue to provide. In this quiet moment, surrounded by the stillness of the wilderness, you begin to understand the deep wisdom that guided Native American life. Their survival was not just about what they could take from the land, it was about how they lived with the land, how they respected it, and how they ensured that future generations could continue to live in harmony with it. In many ways, their survival strategies offer a powerful lesson for us today. As we face challenges like climate change and environmental degradation, the wisdom of Native American cultures reminds us of the importance of living in balance with the earth, respecting its resources, and ensuring that we don't take more than we need. The fire has burned down to its last embers, and the night is fully alive around you. The wilderness, though quiet, feels full of life and energy, as if the earth itself is breathing, resting, and preparing for the next cycle. You realize that survival in the wilderness was never about simply enduring. It was about thriving in a way that honors the earth, its resources, and all its inhabitants. It was about a deep, sacred connection to the land, a connection that allowed Native Americans to live well, not just in the present, but for generations to come. As the night's stillness grows deeper, and the final embers of the fire fade into the dark, the landscape around you feels even more alive, as though the land itself is holding its breath. The survival of Native Americans was more than a series of clever techniques. It was about an overarching philosophy that guided every aspect of their lives. It was a way of life that placed profound importance on sustainability, respect for nature, and a deep understanding of the cycles that governed both the physical and spiritual worlds. The more you reflect on the wisdom of these early peoples, the more it becomes clear that their survival in the wilderness wasn't just a matter of knowing which plants to eat, how to hunt, or where to find shelter. It was about understanding the world as a dynamic, interconnected system. Every plant, every animal, every river and mountain had its role in the ecosystem, and survival was about maintaining the delicate balance between all of these elements. This holistic view of survival was woven into their everyday practices and ceremonies, and it extended far beyond the realm of mere survival into every interaction with the environment. For example, Native American tribes developed methods of sustainable agriculture that allowed them to grow food without depleting the land. The practice of crop rotation, such as the Three Sisters system of corn, beans, and squash, was not just a clever agricultural technique, it was an understanding of the land's capacity to regenerate. The beans added nitrogen to the soil, the corn grew tall to provide structure, and the squash spread out to protect the soil from weeds. Together, these plants created a self-sustaining system that mirrored the natural processes of growth and decay, ensuring that the land would continue to provide for future generations. Historians continue to study the full impact of Native American agricultural practices. Some suggest that their methods were more sustainable than European farming techniques of the time, and that their knowledge of the land was far more sophisticated. Many Native American groups, especially those in the agricultural regions, knew that their food systems depended on the health of the land, which in turn relied on the stewardship of the people who lived on it. They understood that to take too much, or to overwork the land, would lead to depletion. But they also knew how to restore balance, how to plant, harvest, and care for the land in a way that would allow it to continue to give. A quirky tidbit that might surprise you is that some Native American groups also used animals in a similar way to fertilize the land. The Plains tribes, for example, would often hunt bison, and after the hunt, they would scatter the bones and other parts of the animal around the fields. This act wasn't just symbolic, it provided vital nutrients to the soil, enriching it for the next planting season. The bones would break down and add phosphorus and other nutrients that were essential for healthy crops. The very act of hunting and utilizing the animal wasn't just about obtaining food, it was about giving back to the earth in a way that ensured that both the people and the land would thrive. As you sit there, the coolness of the air brushing against your skin, you begin to understand just how integrated survival was into every facet of Native American life. It wasn't something separate. It wasn't just about surviving the wilderness. It was about thriving in the wilderness, but doing so in a way that honored the land, the animals, and the people around you. It was about creating a future where generations could live in harmony with the earth, where each individual understood their role in the larger web of life. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this is how many Native American tribes practiced sustainable hunting. They didn't hunt for sport or excess, they hunted to provide for their families and communities, always keeping in mind the importance of maintaining a balance with the animals they depended on. Bison were hunted, yes, but the hunt was done with great care, ensuring that the herds would continue to thrive. In fact, many tribes had ceremonial hunts, where the community would give thanks to the animals they were hunting, acknowledging their sacrifice and the gift of sustenance they provided. Historians still argue over the exact methods of bison hunting, with some suggesting that the large-scale communal hunts conducted by some tribes were as much about spiritual connection as they were about survival. Others believe that Native Americans were more focused on the practical aspect of hunting, getting the food needed to survive. Regardless of the debate, one thing is clear: the hunt was never just a physical act. It was a spiritual one, too, a way of connecting with the animal, honoring it, and maintaining balance with nature. The use of bison, deer, elk, and other animals didn't end with the hunt. Every part of the animal was utilized, from the meat to the bones, the hide, and the sinew. Nothing went to waste. This resourcefulness allowed Native Americans to create clothing, shelter, tools, and even art. The bones were carved into tools and weapons, the skin was tanned and used for clothing, and the sinew was turned into thread and rope. Even the skulls and horns were sometimes used in ceremonial practices or to create jewelry. Everything had a purpose, nothing was wasted, and everything was treated with respect. As the fire dies down to its last embers, the quiet of the wilderness feels profound, almost sacred. The lessons learned from the Native American approach to survival, respect, balance, sustainability, and cooperation resonate deeply. In a world where resources are often taken for granted and nature is frequently exploited, their way of life offers valuable lessons on how to live with the land, rather than against it. The wisdom passed down through generations is a reminder of the importance of working in harmony with nature and understanding that our survival depends on the health of the earth around us. The fire has burned low now, but its warmth remains in your thoughts. You realize that survival in the wilderness, for Native Americans, was not just a battle to stay alive. It was a way of living that embraced the earth, celebrated its gifts, and ensured that future generations could continue to thrive in balance with the world. As the night sky stretches above, you find peace in knowing that the wisdom of these ancient people still has much to teach us, even today. The silence of the wilderness deepens, the last traces of the fire, now nothing more than glowing embers, their warmth still faintly felt in the cool night air. You sit still, reflecting on the journey through Native American survival in the wilderness, and a profound sense of peace settles over you. It's not just the peace that comes from being in nature, it's the peace that comes from understanding the depth of the knowledge these people had, their ability to not just survive but to live in harmony with the earth. Their survival wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about thriving, about making the most of every season, every cycle, every resource the land had to offer. As you ponder these ancient survival strategies, you realize that Native Americans didn't just adapt to the wilderness, they shaped their lives around it. The land wasn't a place to conquer, but a home to nurture. It was a relationship built on respect, understanding, and balance. Their knowledge of the environment wasn't just intellectual, it was visceral. passed down from generation to generation in a living, breathing way. It was a knowledge that taught them how to grow food sustainably, how to track and hunt with skill, and how to craft tools and shelter with the resources at hand. But perhaps most importantly, it was a knowledge that taught them how to live in harmony with the earth, ensuring their survival and the survival of future generations. The teachings of the Native American peoples about the balance between human life and the natural world resonate even more in today's world. As we face the modern challenges of environmental degradation, climate change, and resource depletion, we find ourselves turning back to some of these ancient practices: sustainable farming, respectful hunting, and the deep, interconnected relationship with nature. In a world that often seems disconnected from the earth, these lessons are more relevant than ever. They remind us that survival is not just about taking from the land, it's about learning how to give back, how to live with nature, and how to honor the land that sustains us. A mainstream historical fact that sheds light on this shift is the growing movement towards sustainability, inspired by indigenous practices. From the resurgence of organic farming to the practice of permaculture, there has been a renewed interest in the farming techniques that Native Americans used. These methods, rooted in respect for the land, focus on creating self-sustaining systems that reduce the need for artificial fertilizers, pesticides, and other harmful practices. By returning to these techniques, we are learning that the earth can provide for us not through exploitation, but through mutual respect and understanding. But it's not just about farming and food. Native American philosophies have influenced many other aspects of modern life. The ideas of communal living, shared responsibility, and mutual support are principles that can be applied to any society, particularly in times of crisis. Many Native American cultures placed great importance on the collective, ensuring that every member of the tribe had a role to play in survival. This was not just about physical survival, it was about emotional and spiritual well-being as well. The community supported each other, shared resources, and worked together toward common goals. It was this sense of community that allowed them to thrive in the wilderness, and it's a lesson that we can take with us today, especially as the world faces greater challenges than ever before. A quirky tidbit that brings this communal spirit to light is the story of the potlatch ceremonies practiced by the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest. These feasts weren't just about food, they were social and spiritual events that served to redistribute wealth and strengthen ties within the community. Those who had more would give to those who had less, ensuring that everyone had what they needed to survive. It was a practice rooted in the belief that abundance should be shared, not hoarded, a lesson that still rings true today. The knowledge that Native Americans passed down wasn't just practical, it was spiritual, rooted in a worldview that saw humanity as part of the earth, not separate from it. They understood that the earth provided everything they needed to survive, but it also demanded respect in return. The practice of giving thanks to the land, the animals, and the plants was an integral part of daily life, a reminder that survival wasn't a one-way transaction, it was a partnership. As you sit in the stillness of the wilderness, the quiet now filled with the subtle sounds of the earth, you realize that the legacy of Native American survival is not just one of endurance, but one of wisdom. It's a legacy that has been passed down through the generations, and one that we can still learn from today. Their understanding of the natural world, their deep connection to the earth, and their ability to live in balance with nature provide timeless lessons for how we can face the challenges of the future. In the quiet, you come to understand that survival in the wilderness is not just about surviving. It's about living in harmony with the world around you, respecting its rhythms, and ensuring that future generations can continue to thrive in the same way. The fire has long since burned out, but the lessons of the land remain, etched in your mind, lessons of respect, balance, and sustainability. As the wilderness around you remains in its quiet beauty, you realize that survival in the wilderness is not about living in fear or scarcity. It's about understanding the gifts that the earth provides and using them wisely, with gratitude and respect. The night's stillness settles deeper, and the wilderness around you feels infinite in its quiet, a world untouched by the rush of time. The fire is now nothing more than glowing embers, and the crisp air has turned even colder, though a sense of calm remains. The journey through understanding the survival of Native Americans has shifted something within you. It's no longer just about surviving in the wilderness. It's about the way they lived with the earth, in a deeply spiritual connection that transcended mere physical survival. It was a way of life that wasn't about conquering the land, but about living harmoniously with it. One of the most powerful aspects of this philosophy was the concept of reciprocity. The belief that everything on earth, whether plant, animal, or stone, has its own spirit, and that humans are part of this spiritual ecosystem, shaped every aspect of Native American survival. Each time an animal was hunted or a plant was gathered, there was an unspoken understanding that these actions were not to be taken lightly. Survival in the wilderness was, for Native Americans, as much about giving back as it was about taking what was needed. The act of hunting was often a spiritual experience, a sacred exchange between humans and the creatures they depended on. The hunt, then, was never just about filling a stomach. It was about honoring the animal, ensuring that the cycle of life continued. Historians still debate the extent to which these spiritual beliefs influenced the practical aspects of Native American survival. Some argue that the spiritual connection to the land and animals was so deeply ingrained in their practices that it shaped everything from hunting techniques to the way they cultivated crops. Others suggest that, while spiritual beliefs were undoubtedly important, they were more symbolic than practical. Regardless of the perspective, one thing is certain: this deep sense of spirituality permeated every aspect of their survival strategies. A quirky tidbit that speaks to this spiritual connection is the practice of spirit stones or medicine stones. These stones were often kept by hunters, carried as a talisman for protection or guidance. Some tribes believed that these stones had a special power that connected them to the spirits of the animals they hunted. It wasn't just about superstition, it was a symbol of the profound relationship between the hunter and the hunted, a reminder that the animals were sacred and that their lives were to be respected. The belief in reciprocity extended beyond hunting and gathering. For Native Americans, the concept of community was also deeply tied to survival. They understood that the success of one was the success of all, and that survival depended on cooperation. This collective approach wasn't just about sharing food, it was about sharing knowledge, skills, and responsibility. In many tribes, elders were seen as the guardians of wisdom, passing down knowledge about the land, the seasons, and the cycles of nature to younger generations. The sharing of this wisdom wasn't just a survival tactic, it was a way of ensuring that the community could continue to thrive, even in the harshest conditions. A mainstream historical fact that illustrates this communal philosophy is the structure of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois believed in the unity of their people, and the leaders of each tribe, known as chiefs, would meet together in councils to discuss important decisions affecting the tribe. These councils weren't just about governance, they were about ensuring that the needs of the entire community were met, that no individual or group was left behind. This collective decision-making process wasn't just about physical survival, it was about the survival of the culture, the values, and the spiritual traditions that tied the people to the land. In the wilderness, survival wasn't just about what the land could provide. It was about how the community could come together to ensure that no one was left to face the harsh realities of nature alone. From building shelters to preparing food, from caring for the sick to defending the tribe, every individual had a role to play. Each person's survival depended on the collective efforts of the group. This sense of interdependence, of shared responsibility, was what allowed Native Americans to survive, and even thrive, in such challenging environments. As you sit by the fire, now reduced to little more than glowing embers, the importance of community in survival becomes clear. In the wilderness, where danger is always present, it wasn't enough to rely on individual strength. Survival was about sharing the burdens, supporting each other, and working together to ensure that the tribe could continue to survive for generations to come. The wilderness around you, so quiet now, seems to echo with the wisdom of the past. It's as though the land itself is speaking, telling you that survival in the wilderness isn't just about the physical tools and skills you possess, it's about the relationships you build, the respect you have for the earth, and the collective spirit that holds everything together. For Native Americans, survival was never just about enduring. It was about thriving, about finding balance, and about living in harmony with the world around you. As the final embers of the fire fade, you realize that survival in the wilderness is a practice that extends far beyond food, water, and shelter. It's about understanding your place in the world, respecting the cycles of life, and ensuring that the earth can continue to provide for future generations. The lessons learned from Native American survival strategies are timeless lessons that remind us that survival isn't just about taking, it's about giving back, living in balance, and honoring the world around us. As the quiet of the wilderness continues to envelope you, the last traces of warmth from the fire dissipate into the cold night. The stars above feel closer now, as though they are witnesses to the stories you've been reflecting on the ancient practices of Native American survival and the wisdom they impart about how to live in balance with the earth. The more you think about it, the more you realize that survival in the wilderness wasn't just about making it through the physical challenges of the environment, it was about living in a way that honored the land, the animals, and the people who shared it. For Native Americans, living in harmony with the land wasn't just a practice, it was a worldview, one that shaped every aspect of their lives. They understood that survival was about more than simply taking what you needed from the earth. It was about nurturing the earth, giving back, and ensuring that what was taken was done so in a way that allowed the land to continue to provide for future generations. The land was a living entity, not something to be conquered, but something to be respected, cared for, and cherished. One of the most profound aspects of Native American survival was their understanding of the cycles of nature. The seasons, the movements of animals, the growth of plants, everything followed a rhythm, and the people adapted to that rhythm. They knew that each season brought its own set of challenges, but they also knew that each season had its own blessings. The spring would bring new growth and fresh food. The summer would bring an abundance of berries, fruits, and fish. The fall would bring the harvest, and the winter would bring a time for rest and reflection. Each season had a purpose, and survival depended on working with those rhythms rather than against them. A mainstream historical fact that reflects this connection to the land is the way many Native American tribes planned and prepared for the changing seasons. In the warmer months, the emphasis was on gathering and preserving food. It was a time of abundance, a time when crops were harvested, berries were picked, and fish were caught. But the fall and winter months were a time of preparation. Food was dried and smoked, tools were made and repaired, and shelters were reinforced. This seasonal approach to survival wasn't just about storing food for the winter, it was about preparing the tribe for the challenges of the colder months, when food and resources would be scarce. It was a deep understanding of how to live in sync with nature's cycles. Historians still argue whether Native Americans had a more holistic approach to seasonal living compared to European settlers, who often relied on more rigid farming techniques and did not have the same level of adaptability. Many Native American tribes used their knowledge of the land's cycles to create systems that were more in tune with the environment, which allowed them to survive in places where European settlers struggled. The key difference was that Native Americans didn't view nature as something to be dominated, they saw themselves as part of a larger web of life, where everything had a role and a purpose. A quirky tidbit about this connection to nature is the way Native American tribes track time. Many of them did not rely on the same linear calendar that we use today. Instead, their sense of time was cyclical, based on the changing seasons, the movements of animals, and the patterns of the sun and moon. This cyclical understanding of time wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. It reinforced the idea that life was part of an ongoing cycle, one that continued through birth, growth, death, and rebirth. It was a reminder that nothing is permanent, and that survival required flexibility and adaptability. This cyclical understanding of time also extended to the ways in which Native Americans practiced agriculture. Unlike modern industrial farming, which often extracts from the land in a way that doesn't allow for natural replenishment, Native Americans worked in partnership with the land. The Three Sisters method of planting corn, beans, and squash was one example of this. These three crops, when planted together, didn't just support each other, they worked in tandem to ensure that the soil remained fertile for future seasons. The beans added nitrogen to the soil, the corn provided support for the beans to grow, and the squash protected the soil from weeds. This simple yet effective farming method was a model of sustainability, a practice that was in tune with the cycles of the earth. As you sit there, surrounded by the wilderness, you realize that survival in the wilderness wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about living in a way that honored the earth, a way that ensured balance, sustainability, and respect for all living things. Native Americans didn't just survive, they thrived, because they understood that life and survival were interconnected with the land, the animals, the plants, and each other. The wisdom they passed down, generation after generation, was not just about physical survival, it was about living well, living respectfully, and living in harmony with the earth. The wilderness, so quiet now, feels like a place of reflection. In the stillness, you understand that survival is not just about enduring, it's about thriving in a way that sustains life, not just for the present, but for the future. It's about understanding the earth as a living entity and recognizing that we are part of its ongoing cycle. The lessons learned from Native American survival strategies are timeless, offering insights not only into how we can survive, but into how we can live better, more harmoniously, and sustainably with the world around us. As the stars twinkle above and the cool night air surrounds you, you realize that the true lesson of survival in the wilderness is about more than just physical endurance. It's about respect, balance, and sustainability. It's about understanding our place in the larger web of life and making sure that we live in a way that ensures future generations can thrive, just as the Native Americans did before us. The knowledge they passed down offers us a path forward, a path that embraces the earth, nurtures it, and ensures that the cycles of life continue. The night's silence now feels vast, the world around you settled into a peaceful stillness that contrasts sharply with the bustling lives of modern society. As you sit quietly, surrounded by the wilderness, your thoughts shift to the last piece of this survival puzzle: how Native Americans not only lived in harmony with the land but also adapted their ways to changing conditions. They didn't just survive in the wilderness because of what they knew, they thrived because of their ability to adapt, innovate, and, above all, honor the environment around them. Survival wasn't just about using resources, it was about managing them in a way that would allow the community to flourish. Whether through agriculture, hunting, or the crafting of tools, Native Americans understood that to live sustainably in the wilderness, one had to adapt not only to the changing seasons, but also to the changing needs of the tribe. This adaptability was key to their success, allowing them to respond to challenges without compromising the balance they worked so hard to maintain. A mainstream historical fact that brings this adaptability to light is the way Native Americans developed specialized techniques for different environments. For instance, in the Pacific Northwest, where dense forests and rivers created a rich environment, fishing became a central part of life. The tribes of this region, like the Chinook and the Tlingit, developed advanced fishing techniques, using nets, weirs, and traps to catch salmon. In contrast, the Plains tribes, who followed the migration patterns of the bison, had to develop entirely different survival techniques. They didn't just hunt bison, they developed strategies for moving with the herds, using every part of the animal, and creating mobile shelters, such as the teepee, that could be easily assembled and disassembled as they moved. Historians still debate how much cross-cultural exchange occurred between different tribes, with some arguing that tribes adapted independently to their environments, while others suggest that these practices were shared and refined through trade networks. Regardless of the origins, what is clear is that Native Americans didn't see their environment as something fixed, they saw it as something fluid, something to work with and adapt to as conditions changed. Whether it was adapting to the seasonal shifts, learning from other tribes, or responding to the impacts of European colonization, Native Americans demonstrated a remarkable capacity to adapt to new circumstances while staying true to their values of sustainability and respect for nature. A quirky tidbit worth noting is the way Native American tribes utilized the environment in unexpected ways. For example, in the arid Southwest, where water was scarce, the Havasupai people developed sophisticated systems of water conservation. They built their homes near springs, but also designed channels and cisterns to capture and store rainwater. This practice wasn't just practical, it was an expression of their deep understanding of the natural environment and their ability to adapt to it. By using the limited water resources wisely, they could thrive in an otherwise inhospitable climate. It's this ability to adapt and innovate that ensured their survival, no matter the challenges they faced. This adaptability wasn't just limited to physical survival techniques. The way Native Americans adapted to European colonization is another powerful example of their resilience. As European settlers began to encroach on Native American territories, many tribes adapted their survival strategies to cope with the new social, political, and environmental pressures. They engaged in trade, learning to use European tools and goods to improve their own practices, while also negotiating for land, resources, and cultural preservation. This adaptability allowed many tribes to survive in a world that was changing rapidly around them, finding ways to maintain their identity, culture, and connection to the land, even in the face of immense external pressure. As you sit by the embers of the fire, you begin to realize that survival in the wilderness wasn't just about enduring, it was about thriving through adaptation. Native Americans demonstrated an incredible capacity for flexibility, resilience, and innovation, allowing them to live sustainably in environments that, to the untrained eye, might have seemed inhospitable. They understood that survival was a dynamic process, one that required constant learning, adaptation, and a deep connection to the natural world. The quiet of the wilderness now feels profound. It's a reminder that survival isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about working with the land, understanding its rhythms, and adapting to its changes. In the modern world, as we face challenges like climate change, resource depletion, and environmental degradation, we too must learn to adapt, to live sustainably, and to respect the natural world. The lessons of Native American survival, passed down through generations, offer a blueprint for how we can face these challenges by respecting the earth, working together as a community, and adapting to the ever-changing conditions that shape our lives. In the stillness of the night, you understand that survival is not just about using resources, it's about learning to adapt to the land, to honor it, and to live in a way that sustains not just the present, but the future. Just as Native Americans adapted to their environment and passed down their knowledge, we too can find ways to live in balance with nature, ensuring that future generations will inherit a world that is thriving, not depleted. Their legacy of adaptability, respect, and sustainability offers us a path forward, one that honors the land, its cycles, and the life it sustains. As the last embers of the fire glow softly in the darkness, you realize that survival isn't just a battle against the elements, it's a way of living that honors the earth and ensures that its gifts will continue to provide for generations to come. The wisdom of Native American survival strategies teaches us that we are all part of a larger cycle, and it is only by working with the land, not against it, that we can truly thrive. The night, now completely settled, has wrapped you in its quiet embrace. The wilderness around you feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter of the journey to unfold. The embers from the fire have long since died, leaving behind a soft glow that feels like the last remnant of warmth in the vast cold. As you sit in the stillness, you realize that the journey through Native American survival has led you to a deeper understanding of not just how they survived, but how their approach to life, deeply connected to nature, to community, and to each other, can still guide us today. This connection to community was central to Native American survival. In their cultures, survival was never an isolated endeavor. It was a collective effort, one where each member of the tribe had a role to play, where each person was integral to the well-being of the whole. Whether it was sharing food, helping to build shelter, or caring for the young, the sick, and the elderly, Native American survival was based on interdependence. The survival of the tribe depended on the survival of each individual, and vice versa. This shared responsibility was not just a practical solution, it was a deeply spiritual one. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this idea is the role of communal hunting and gathering in many Native American societies. In the case of the Plains tribes, the bison hunt was often a coordinated, communal activity that required precise timing and collaboration. Every member of the tribe had a role to play in the hunt. The hunters, of course, took the lead, but the entire tribe participated, whether in preparing the hunt, assisting with the butchering, or preserving the meat. Each part of the process was essential, and no one person could have done it alone. The bison hunt wasn't just a means of survival. It was a reminder of the power of cooperation and the strength that comes from working together for a common goal. Historians still debate the extent to which cooperation and community were the driving forces behind Native American survival strategies. Some argue that the reliance on communal work was more pronounced in certain tribes, like the Iroquois or the Pueblos, while others suggest that some groups, especially those living in more isolated areas, may have relied more heavily on individual efforts. Regardless of the differences, the underlying principle remains the same. Survival was a collective responsibility, and every member of the tribe was essential to the community's success. A quirky tidbit that brings this communal effort to life is the tradition of the potlatch, practiced by many Pacific Northwest tribes. The potlatch wasn't just a feast, it was a ceremony of giving and receiving, a way of redistributing wealth and resources within the tribe. Those who had more would give to those who had less, ensuring that everyone had what they needed to survive. It wasn't just about material wealth, it was about strengthening the social bonds that held the community together. The potlatch was a physical manifestation of the idea that survival was not just about material accumulation, but about sharing and supporting each other. As you sit in the quiet wilderness, surrounded by the peace that comes with understanding, it becomes clear that the Native American approach to survival wasn't just about what they could take from the earth, it was about how they gave back to it. It was about living in a way that honored not just the land, but the people around them. Every action, from the hunt to the harvest, was a reminder of the interconnectedness of all life. And the survival of the tribe depended on maintaining that connection not just to the earth, but to each other. This sense of interconnectedness is perhaps one of the most powerful lessons we can take from Native American survival strategies. In a world that often emphasizes individual success and competition, their approach teaches us the value of community, of working together for a common good. Their survival wasn't a solitary pursuit, it was a shared experience, one where every individual contributed to the whole. And this approach, rooted in respect for nature and one another, can still guide us today as we face global challenges. Whether it's combating climate change, addressing social inequalities, or simply finding ways to live more sustainably, the lessons of Native American survival offer a roadmap for how we can live in harmony with each other and with the world around us. As you sit in the stillness, reflecting on these lessons, it becomes clear that the wisdom passed down through generations of Native Americans is not just a relic of the past, it is a timeless guide for the future. Their survival in the wilderness wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about thriving through cooperation, sustainability, and respect for the land. It was about living in balance with the earth, understanding that our survival is intrinsically linked to the survival of the natural world. The night around you continues to hum with the quiet energy of the earth, and as you sit there, immersed in the stillness, you realize that the true meaning of survival isn't just about enduring the hardships of the wilderness, it's about understanding our place in the world, working together, and ensuring that the earth continues to provide for future generations. The lessons of Native American survival strategies teach us that we are all connected, that our survival is intertwined with the health of the earth, and that we must work together to ensure that balance is maintained. As the night lingers and the wilderness embraces you, you understand that survival in the wilderness isn't just about living to see another day, it's about living well, living harmoniously, and ensuring that the cycle of life continues for generations to come. The stars above shine brightly, their cold light casting a serene glow over the wilderness. The fire has long since faded into the quiet night, and the world around you feels vast, as though it has always been and will continue long after this moment. You sit there, reflecting on everything you've learned about Native American survival, their connection to the earth, their respect for balance, and their ability to adapt to the challenges of the wilderness. It's a humbling realization that survival wasn't just about enduring in the wilderness, it was about living in harmony with it, understanding the rhythms of nature, and creating a life that worked with the land, not against it. Perhaps one of the most inspiring aspects of Native American survival was their ingenuity. The tools and methods they developed for hunting, fishing, gathering, and building were as diverse as the landscapes they inhabited. They crafted tools from the materials available to them: stone, bone, wood, and animal hides, and each tool was designed with efficiency and sustainability in mind. These weren't just survival tools, they were extensions of their knowledge, reflections of the deep connection they had with the world around them. A mainstream historical fact that showcases their resourcefulness is the way Native Americans crafted their hunting weapons. In the Great Plains, where bison were a vital source of food and materials, the bow and arrow were essential tools. The design of the bow was both practical and symbolic. Native American bows were crafted from a variety of materials, including wood, animal sinew, and sometimes even horn. They were designed not just for efficiency in the hunt, but also for portability and flexibility, important traits for a people who moved across vast distances in search of food. Arrowheads, made from stone, bone, or metal, were shaped with incredible precision, each one suited for a specific type of game. Historians still debate how advanced the Native American hunting tools were compared to those of early European settlers. Some argue that Native American tools were far more suited to their environment, especially considering the speed and agility required for hunting in the open plains. Others suggest that European settlers had the technological advantage with firearms, which, despite being powerful, were less practical in the vast landscapes where stealth and speed were essential. Regardless of the comparison, it's clear that Native American tools were a testament to their deep understanding of the natural world. A quirky tidbit that might surprise you is the ingenuity behind Native American fishing techniques. In the Pacific Northwest, where rivers teemed with salmon, Native Americans developed some of the most sophisticated fishing methods known. The Chinook and other coastal tribes used nets, weirs, and traps to catch fish, but they also devised ways to ensure the fish would continue to return season after season. One of the most interesting techniques involved the use of fish fences, carefully constructed barriers that guided fish into traps. These fences were made from woven plant materials and strategically placed in the river to allow fish to swim into the traps, but not out. This level of precision in fishing wasn't just about catching fish, it was about ensuring that the fish population remained healthy and abundant for future generations. This respect for the land and the need to ensure sustainability was reflected in all aspects of Native American survival. From hunting and fishing to farming and building, every resource was used with care. The materials that came from the earth, stone, wood, bone, and plants, were treated with respect, used for both their practical value and their spiritual significance. Every tool, every shelter, every meal was an expression of gratitude to the land. Even the act of hunting was done with reverence. Many Native American tribes performed rituals before and after the hunt, thanking the animal for its sacrifice and ensuring that its spirit would continue to live on in the cycle of life. As you sit in the stillness, the moon now casting a soft light over the land, you realize that survival wasn't just about taking, it was about giving back. It was about maintaining balance with the earth, ensuring that resources were not depleted and that the land could continue to provide. The Native American way of life wasn't just about surviving the wilderness, it was about thriving in a way that respected the environment and worked with it. It was a way of life that understood the interconnectedness of all things, where the land, the animals, and the people were all part of a larger cycle of life. This holistic view of survival is something that's deeply needed in today's world. As we face challenges like climate change, deforestation, and the depletion of natural resources, the lessons of Native American survival offer us a roadmap for how to live in a way that respects the earth. Their methods were built on sustainability and harmony, principles that have never been more relevant than they are now. The fire may have died, but the lessons of the land remain lessons of respect, cooperation, sustainability, and adaptability. In the wilderness around you, the land breathes with life, holding the wisdom of centuries. As you sit in this quiet moment, you understand that survival in the wilderness is not about conquering nature, it's about learning to live with it, respecting its rhythms, and working together to ensure that the balance is maintained. Just as Native Americans did, we too can thrive by embracing these lessons, working in harmony with the earth, and ensuring that future generations will inherit a world that is rich in resources, knowledge, and connection. The wilderness, now quiet and still, holds these lessons close, waiting for those who are willing to listen. The wilderness continues its deep, serene quiet as the hours stretch on and the last remnants of warmth from the fire dissipate into the cool air. The stars above twinkle softly, a reminder of the timelessness of the earth, and in the stillness, a profound sense of understanding settles within you. As you reflect on the lessons of survival passed down by the Native Americans, you realize that the wisdom they carried was not just practical, it was a way of life, a way that intertwined physical survival with spiritual, social, and ecological well-being. This holistic approach is a living testament to the enduring balance that must be maintained if humanity is to thrive. Native Americans knew that survival wasn't a single journey, it was a collective, cyclical process that demanded respect and understanding of the environment. Their survival strategies were not just about getting by, they were about thriving within the natural world, in a manner that ensured both the people and the land would flourish together. Their relationship with the earth wasn't just about taking what was needed to stay alive, it was about ensuring the long-term health of the environment that sustained them. A mainstream historical fact that reflects this concept is the practice of land management. Native American tribes developed sophisticated techniques to manage their landscapes and ensure sustainability. In the southeastern United States, the Cherokee and other tribes practiced swidden or slash-and-burn agriculture, a technique that involved cutting and burning trees to clear land for farming. While this method could seem destructive to the untrained eye, the tribes understood that it rejuvenated the soil. The ash provided vital nutrients, allowing crops to grow more successfully. The practice was also carefully regulated, with land being left to regenerate after a few years, preventing overuse and ensuring that the land could continue to provide for generations to come. Historians still debate how these agricultural methods impacted the environment in the long term. Some argue that the techniques were environmentally sustainable, fostering biodiversity, while others suggest that certain methods may have been more damaging over time. Nonetheless, what remains clear is that the Native American approach to farming, hunting, and gathering was rooted in a deep understanding of the land's natural cycles, a respect for what it could offer, and a commitment to maintaining that balance. A quirky tidbit worth mentioning is how many Native American tribes, particularly in the Great Plains, used fire not only to manage the land, but also to encourage the growth of specific plants. Controlled burns were a common practice, not just to clear brush for hunting and farming, but to stimulate the growth of plants like wildflowers and grasses that were essential for the local wildlife. These burns would promote the growth of nutritious plants, which in turn would attract the animals that the tribes relied on for food. It was a finely tuned balance. Hunting, farming, and land management were all integrated into a system that ensured both ecological and social health. But survival in the wilderness wasn't just about food and land management, it was about the people too. The social structures of Native American tribes played an equally important role in their survival. The tribe was a collective unit, and each person had a role to play, from the youngest children to the elders. The elders were the keepers of knowledge, passing down traditions, survival strategies, and spiritual teachings. The youth were the future, learning through apprenticeship and observation. This mutual dependence, where each person's survival was interconnected with the well-being of the tribe, is what allowed these communities to thrive, not just survive. In the wilderness, survival was never just an individual effort, it was a communal one. Whether it was working together to build shelter, share food, or care for the sick, Native American communities understood that each person's actions impacted the whole. In times of abundance, food and resources were shared, and in times of scarcity, the tribe would come together to ensure that everyone had enough to survive. It wasn't just about individual survival, it was about the survival of the community as a whole. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this communal survival is the tradition of communal feasts and gatherings. These were not just times for celebration, they were vital for strengthening social bonds, ensuring cooperation, and reinforcing the interconnectedness of the tribe. For example, the Iroquois held regular feasts that were integral to maintaining peace and unity among the nations of the Confederacy. These gatherings were a way to renew social ties, resolve conflicts, and ensure that all members of the community felt supported. Historians still debate whether these communal practices were as central to survival in all Native American societies, or whether they varied depending on the environment and cultural practices. However, what remains undeniable is that the survival of the tribe was rooted in its ability to work together, share resources, and support one another. This sense of interdependence was as crucial to their survival as their ability to hunt, gather, and farm. As you sit quietly in the wilderness, surrounded by the vast silence of the earth, you realize that the true essence of survival for Native Americans wasn't just about making it through another day. It was about understanding the land, working together as a community, and ensuring that future generations would thrive, just as they had. It was a life lived in balance with nature, where every action, whether it was hunting, farming, or building, was a reflection of that balance. This approach to survival offers us valuable lessons today. In a world where individualism often prevails, and the urgency of the present moment can cloud our judgment, the Native American philosophy of communal survival is a powerful reminder that we are all connected. The choices we make today impact not only ourselves but also the world around us and the generations to come. Just as Native Americans understood their survival as part of a greater web of life, we too must understand that our survival is intertwined with the health of the earth, the people, and the communities that share it. The night is now fully upon you, and the earth around you feels peaceful, waiting for the next cycle to begin. The lessons of the past, passed down through generations, remain in your mind, lessons of balance, respect, and survival that transcend time and place. The wilderness is now fully embraced by the night, the air crisp and quiet, the land holding a calm that feels eternal. The last flicker of the fire has faded, and the only sounds are the subtle whispers of nature, telling stories of the earth's ancient wisdom. As you sit there, reflecting on the lessons of Native American survival, you begin to feel a deeper understanding settle within you. It's not just about how they survived in the wilderness, it's about how they thrived, living in a way that was in perfect harmony with the natural world. The principles of sustainability, balance, and reciprocity weren't just survival tactics, they were deeply embedded in the worldview of Native Americans. The way they saw the earth, the animals, the plants, and the weather was rooted in a spiritual understanding that everything was interconnected. This worldview didn't just shape their hunting, farming, and gathering practices, it shaped the very fabric of their lives. It taught them how to live with the land, rather than take from it recklessly. It guided them in knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to give thanks. A mainstream historical fact that illustrates this worldview is the significance of seasonal migration. Native American tribes, especially those in the plains and northern forests, often practiced seasonal migration, moving to different areas to follow the cycles of game and to avoid overexploiting any one area. This wasn't just a practical strategy, it was a spiritual one. Many tribes believed that by moving with the seasons, they were honoring the earth's natural rhythms, ensuring that the land had time to regenerate. The migration was not just about food, it was a way of living in harmony with nature, recognizing that everything has its time and place in the cycle of life. Historians still debate whether seasonal migration was as common across all Native American tribes as it was in some regions. Some suggest that it was more pronounced among the Plains tribes, who followed the bison herds, while others argue that it was less common in agricultural societies, where people remained in one location to tend to crops. Regardless of the specifics, what is clear is that the concept of movement and renewal, of respecting the land and allowing it to rest, was central to their survival. It was a dynamic approach to living with the earth, a recognition that sustainability wasn't just about what you could take, but about what you could leave behind. A quirky tidbit worth noting is the practice of sacred rituals tied to the changing seasons. Many Native American tribes performed elaborate ceremonies to mark the transitions between the seasons. These rituals were more than just symbolic, they were spiritual acknowledgements of the land's power. In the fall, for example, many tribes celebrated harvest festivals, giving thanks for the bounty of the earth and offering prayers for a good winter. The ceremony wasn't just about expressing gratitude, it was about ensuring that the earth would continue to provide, honoring the relationship between the people and the land. In addition to seasonal ceremonies, the practice of storytelling was an essential part of maintaining this connection. Stories were not just entertainment, they were vehicles for passing down wisdom, survival strategies, and cultural values. Each story told was a living history, a way of ensuring that the lessons of the past were passed on to future generations. Storytelling was a way to share knowledge about how to navigate the seasons, how to track animals, how to forage for food, and how to live in harmony with the natural world. It was a crucial tool for survival, one that ensured that cultural wisdom wasn't lost, but continued to guide the tribe. As you sit quietly, surrounded by the timeless stillness of the wilderness, you begin to understand the profound significance of this connection. Survival was never just about the physical act of gathering food and building shelter. It was about creating a life that was in balance with the earth. It was about living with the land, not over it. The land provided everything the people needed, but it also required respect and care in return. It was a reciprocal relationship, where each action, whether it was planting, hunting, or gathering, was done with gratitude and reverence. This connection wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. Native Americans understood the land in a way that modern society often overlooks. They knew when to plant, when to harvest, and when to let the land rest. They understood the cycles of the earth and the rhythms of nature, and they adapted to those rhythms, working in harmony with them. Their survival strategies weren't about controlling the land, they were about being in tune with it, about understanding how to coexist in a way that allowed both people and the earth to thrive. In today's world, where industrialization and urbanization have distanced many people from the natural world, the lessons of Native American survival are more relevant than ever. As we face environmental challenges, we are reminded that sustainability is not just a modern concept, it is an ancient wisdom that has been passed down for generations. The Native American approach to survival teaches us that we must live with the earth, not against it. We must learn to respect its cycles, to work with its rhythms, and to ensure that we leave it in a better state for future generations. As the night deepens, the wilderness around you feels full of quiet wisdom. The earth, in its infinite stillness, holds the knowledge of survival, of balance, and of respect. The lessons of Native American survival are timeless, a reminder that to truly thrive in the world, we must learn to live in harmony with it. The earth is not something to be conquered. It is something to be respected, nurtured, and protected. And in this understanding, we can find a path forward, one that honors the earth and ensures that future generations can continue to live in balance with the natural world. The quiet of the wilderness seems to deepen as the night stretches on, the moonlight casting long shadows across the land. The air is crisp, and there's a subtle sense of timelessness as you sit, reflecting on everything that has been shared through the stories of Native American survival. Their approach to life, rooted in respect for the land, the cycles of nature, and the wisdom passed down from generation to generation, was not just a survival strategy. It was a philosophy, a worldview that ensured their survival through a balance of respect, knowledge, and community. As the stillness surrounds you, it becomes clear that one of the most crucial elements in Native American survival was their ability to learn from the environment and adapt their ways to fit the land they lived on. Every tribe had a unique relationship with its environment, shaped by the geography, climate, and available resources. In some ways, their survival was determined not just by their knowledge of the land, but by how they had adapted to the challenges their environment presented. Whether it was the desert's harsh heat, the plains' wide-open spaces, or the dense forests filled with game, Native Americans thrived because they understood that each environment required different strategies, techniques, and practices. A mainstream historical fact that underscores this adaptability is the way the Inuit, or Eskimo, tribes of the Arctic used every part of the land to create a way of life that allowed them to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. These tribes developed specialized clothing made from animal hides, constructed insulated shelters from snow and ice, igloos, and crafted tools from bone, stone, and wood to hunt seals, whales, and other marine life. Their survival depended on understanding the delicate balance of the Arctic ecosystem. They knew how to track animals in the snow, how to build shelters that could withstand the brutal cold, and how to use the available resources efficiently. Every part of their environment, every animal, plant, and stone was put to use, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Historians still argue whether the Inuits' technological advancements were independent inventions or the result of cultural exchanges. Some believe their tools and methods were developed in isolation, tailored specifically to the challenges of the Arctic, while others suggest there may have been some degree of exchange with other northern cultures. Regardless of the origins, it's undeniable that the Inuits' adaptation to their environment was a remarkable example of survival. A quirky tidbit that adds to this story is the ingenious method the Inuit used to travel across the frozen landscape. They crafted sleds called kanisk from bone, wood, and animal hides, pulled by dogs that were specially bred to withstand the freezing conditions. These sleds, lightweight yet strong, were perfect for moving across the snow and ice, enabling the Inuit to transport goods, hunting tools, and even the carcasses of large marine animals. This innovation was crucial for their ability to maintain their way of life in an environment where mobility was limited and resources were spread out. But while the Inuit thrived in the cold, Native American tribes in more temperate climates had their own set of challenges and their own solutions. For example, in the southeastern woodlands, the Cherokee and Creek tribes developed farming techniques that allowed them to cultivate a wide variety of crops, from maize to beans and squash. They also utilized the rich forests for hunting, gathering, and building. Their survival strategies were rooted in the wisdom of the land, passed down through generations, ensuring that each member of the community knew how to use the environment's resources effectively and sustainably. Another example of adaptation can be found in the Great Plains, where the Lakota, Cheyenne, and other tribes followed the herds of bison. These tribes used the bison not only for food, but for shelter, clothing, tools, and even spiritual ceremonies. The bison hunt was not just a physical survival tactic, it was a spiritual practice, where the entire community took part, offering thanks for the animal's sacrifice and ensuring that no part of the animal went to waste. The survival of these tribes was intertwined with the migration patterns of the bison, and their ability to adapt to the changing needs of the herds was key to their survival. As you sit under the vast sky, you realize that survival in the wilderness was never just about enduring hardship. It was about understanding the environment, adapting to it, and maintaining balance with the natural world. For Native Americans, survival was not a passive experience. It was an active, ongoing process of learning, adapting, and respecting the land. It was about finding innovative solutions to the challenges posed by the environment and using the resources at hand in the most sustainable and respectful way possible. This adaptability didn't just apply to physical survival, it extended to cultural survival as well. Native American tribes learned to adapt to external pressures, whether it was the encroachment of European settlers, changes in climate, or shifts in trade routes. They found ways to preserve their cultural identities, while also learning from other cultures and incorporating new ideas and technologies into their practices. This ability to adapt while maintaining cultural integrity ensured that Native American communities could withstand the challenges of time. In the stillness of the wilderness, you come to realize that survival is not just about enduring the elements, it's about understanding them. It's about using what the earth provides, but also giving back to it. It's about adapting to the changes that come, whether those changes are seasonal, environmental, or social. The Native American approach to survival teaches us that we are not separate from the land, but a part of it. To thrive in the wilderness, we must learn to live with it, adapt to it, and honor it. As the night continues to stretch on, with the cool air around you and the faint echo of the wilderness in your ears, you understand that the true key to survival is not just in knowing how to endure, it's in knowing how to adapt, how to respect, and how to live in harmony with the earth. The wisdom passed down by Native American cultures, with their respect for nature, their resourcefulness, and their communal spirit, offers timeless lessons for how we can face the challenges of the present and the future. By learning from them, we can find ways to live not just in survival, but in balance. The night stretches on, and the wilderness around you feels more profound, as though the land itself is wrapped in the quiet wisdom of ages. The stars above seem eternal, their light offering a steady reminder of the countless generations that have come before, each one learning from the earth, adapting, and passing down the knowledge of survival. Sitting there, reflecting on everything you've learned, you realize that the journey of survival was never one of isolation. It was a journey that was shared, passed down through stories, through teachings, through community. Native Americans, more than anyone, understood that survival was never just about the individual, it was about the tribe, the land, and the generations that followed. One of the most profound aspects of Native American survival was their deep understanding of intergenerational knowledge. In a world where survival could often be precarious, the elders of the tribe were the keepers of wisdom, the bridge between the past and the future. They held the stories of how to live, how to hunt, how to farm, and how to build, and they passed these lessons down to the younger generations. The survival of the tribe depended not just on the immediate actions of the present, but on the continuity of knowledge from one generation to the next. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this intergenerational knowledge is the oral tradition. Many Native American tribes did not rely on written records, but instead, knowledge was passed down orally through storytelling. These stories were not just myths or legends, they were practical lessons about survival, the land, and the relationships between people, animals, and nature. Elders would teach the younger members of the tribe about the ways of the world, passing down essential skills and survival techniques that were vital to the tribe's continued existence. The stories weren't just about entertainment, they were survival manuals, filled with wisdom that had been honed over centuries. Historians still argue whether oral traditions can be as reliable as written records when it comes to passing down historical knowledge. Some suggest that oral traditions can change over time, with details lost or altered, while others argue that these traditions, passed down by elders who were entrusted with preserving them, carry just as much truth and wisdom as written texts. What is undeniable is that these oral traditions were essential to the survival of Native American cultures, and they continue to play a significant role in preserving cultural identities today. A quirky tidbit about Native American oral traditions is how the stories were often told with songs, dances, and rituals that made them more than just narratives. These performances were meant to connect the listener not only to the story itself, but to the deeper meaning behind it. Stories about animals, for example, weren't just tales of hunting or adventure, they were lessons about how humans could learn from the animal world. The wolf, known for its loyalty, was often a symbol of community, while the eagle, with its sharp vision and strength, was seen as a messenger of the divine. The animals in these stories weren't just characters, they were teachers, offering lessons on how to live in balance with the world. As you sit, reflecting on the significance of these stories, it becomes clear that Native American survival wasn't just about practical knowledge, it was about living with purpose. The stories told by the elders weren't just there to teach survival skills, they were there to guide the tribe's spiritual and emotional well-being. They were a way of ensuring that each person understood their role in the tribe, in the community, and in the larger web of life. Each person had a responsibility, and each generation carried the weight of preserving the balance for those who would come after them. The importance of these traditions and stories is not just historical, it's something that can still be applied today. In a world that often values individualism and fast-paced, short-term thinking, the Native American approach teaches us the value of community, intergenerational wisdom, and long-term sustainability. As modern societies struggle with challenges like climate change and social inequality, we are reminded that the survival of humanity is not just about our actions today, it's about ensuring that the world we leave behind is one that future generations can thrive in. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this need for long-term thinking is the creation of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois, in particular, had a deeply rooted system of governance known as the Great Law of Peace, which ensured that decisions were made not just with the present in mind, but with consideration for 7 generations into the future. This long-term thinking was central to their survival as a people, as it ensured that each decision, from land use to governance, was made with the future in mind. It was a model of sustainability, one that has lessons for us today, especially as we look to the future of our planet. In the quiet of the wilderness, you realize that the key to survival, in both the physical and spiritual sense, lies in understanding that we are not just living for ourselves. Our actions have ripple effects, and the choices we make today will impact the generations to come. Native American cultures understood this in ways that we are just beginning to rediscover. Their survival strategies were not just about overcoming challenges, they were about living in a way that ensured the survival of their culture, their land, and their way of life for generations to come. As you sit in the stillness, surrounded by the peace of the wilderness, you come to understand that survival in the wilderness isn't just about enduring hardship or finding the quickest way to overcome an obstacle. It's about taking the long view, about understanding the balance between what is taken and what is given, and about ensuring that we pass down knowledge and wisdom that will allow future generations to thrive. It's about living with purpose, in harmony with the earth, and with an eye toward the future, knowing that our survival depends on the survival of the planet itself. The night grows even quieter, the wilderness now fully embraced by the stillness of the dark, with only the faintest rustle of leaves in the breeze. The stars above seem like ancient witnesses, observing a world that, despite the passage of time, remains unchanged in its core essence. As you sit here, in this peaceful silence, reflecting on everything you've learned, it becomes clear that Native American survival wasn't just a set of techniques, it was a way of living that integrated wisdom, spirituality, and a deep understanding of the Earth's rhythms. It was a way of life that valued sustainability, respect, and community, where each person's actions were a reflection of their connection to the land and the people around them. In all of this, the lessons of the past resonate. Native Americans didn't just survive in the wilderness, they thrived because they understood the need to live in harmony with nature, to work together as a community, and to adapt to the cycles of life. Their survival strategies weren't isolated practices, they were part of a larger worldview that recognized the interdependence of all things. Whether it was the way they used the land, the way they passed down knowledge, or the way they shared resources, everything was rooted in balance, a balance that allowed them to not only endure, but to flourish. The core of this survival philosophy can be summed up in the concept of reciprocity, a two-way relationship with the land, where both people and the earth give and take in a respectful and sustainable way. Every hunt, every crop planted, every shelter built, was done with the understanding that the earth was a living, breathing entity that deserved respect. The Native Americans understood that their actions had consequences, and that the way they interacted with the earth would directly impact the future. This was not just a survival tactic, it was a spiritual belief that the earth was sacred and that its resources were gifts, not to be taken for granted. Historians often argue about the deep spiritual aspects of Native American survival, with some suggesting that the practices were deeply entwined with their belief systems, while others argue that they were primarily practical solutions developed through trial and error. Regardless of where the debate lies, what is undeniable is that their survival techniques were rooted in respect for the earth, an understanding of its power, and a deep sense of responsibility to maintain balance. This balance between taking and giving back was central to their way of life. A quirky tidbit to consider is the way Native Americans viewed the animals they hunted, particularly the bison. The Plains tribes, who relied heavily on the bison for food, clothing, and tools, saw the bison as a sacred being. The hunt was never just about gathering meat, it was a deeply spiritual event, one that required respect for the animal's spirit. Before and after the hunt, rituals were performed to honor the bison, to thank it for its sacrifice, and to ensure its spirit would continue to guide the tribe. This ritualistic approach to hunting was not just a matter of tradition, it was part of their survival, as it reinforced the bond between humans and the animals that provided for them. As you sit in the stillness of the night, the sense of interconnectedness becomes clearer. Survival wasn't just about physical endurance, it was about understanding the delicate balance that existed between humans, animals, plants, and the earth. The Native American way of life was built on the premise that all things were interconnected, and that the survival of one depended on the health and well-being of all. This knowledge, passed down through generations, helped tribes thrive in diverse environments, from the arid deserts to the cold Arctic tundra. The wisdom of knowing when to take, when to give, and how to live in balance with the earth allowed them to navigate the challenges of survival and ensure their place within the broader natural world. In today's world, where the balance between humans and nature often seems disrupted, the lessons of Native American survival remain profoundly relevant. Their ability to live in harmony with the earth, to understand its rhythms, and to work together as a community offers valuable insights for how we can approach the challenges we face today. From environmental degradation to the loss of cultural knowledge, we are reminded that survival isn't just about technology or wealth, it's about understanding our place within the natural world and ensuring that we maintain the balance that has sustained humanity for thousands of years. As the night deepens and the stars continue to shine above, you realize that the ultimate lesson of survival is not about conquering the land, it's about living with it, learning from it, and respecting the wisdom it offers. The Native American way of survival is a reminder that true strength lies in adaptability, in working together, and in living in balance with the earth. The earth, with all its beauty, power, and wisdom, offers everything we need to survive, but only if we learn to respect it and live in harmony with it. The fire has long since gone out, and the stillness of the wilderness continues to surround you. But the wisdom of the land and the lessons of Native American survival remain within you, reminding you that survival is not just about enduring hardship, it's about understanding the delicate balance of life, respecting the land, and ensuring that future generations can live in the same harmony that has sustained life on Earth for millennia. As the fire has burned low, and the stars twinkle above in the serene quiet of the wilderness, the lessons of survival in this vast, ancient land continue to echo. You find yourself wrapped in a peaceful understanding that survival is more than just physical strength. It is about learning to live with the land, understanding its rhythms, and respecting the life it sustains. The wisdom of Native American cultures, passed down through generations, reminds us that survival is not about domination or control. It's about balance, adaptability, and respect. You reflect on the deep connection Native Americans had with the earth, the animals, and each other, and how their survival was never an isolated pursuit. It was a communal effort, a shared responsibility. Each decision made, from hunting to gathering, from building shelters to preparing for winter, was done with an awareness that the earth is not just something to use, but something to honor and protect. Their survival strategies weren't just about getting by, they were about living well, living sustainably, and passing down wisdom to ensure that future generations could continue to thrive. As the cool night air surrounds you, you realize that these lessons of balance and sustainability are as relevant today as they ever were. The world around you is full of wisdom, waiting to be rediscovered. We are all part of a larger ecosystem, interconnected and interdependent. And survival isn't just about enduring, it's about living in harmony with the earth, working together as communities, and ensuring that the earth continues to provide for future generations. Now, dim the lights, let the quiet of the night settle over you, and remember the lessons of the earth. May you carry them with you as you embrace the rhythms of the world around you. Sweet dreams.